Chapter 970. Hey, Edward here. Zhang Hai waved his hand and called out to Edward Anderson, who had just walked down from the dock. Because there was a copy last night, Zhang Hai got up early in the morning, because Edward Anderson and the others would come back at this time. The fish were all caught at night, and then they would be transported to the dock in Boston before dawn. Then the people from the Tunglong Company and the high-end restaurants in Boston would gather there. The people from Walmart sent by Pro Walton would tell the people from the Tunglong Company what fish they wanted today and where they were going to send it. Then the people from the Tunglong Company would transport the seafood, either chilled or frozen, directly to the airport, and then fly straight to the place they agreed on, where the people from the Walmart Company would be waiting to pick up the goods. Edward Anderson and the others would return directly, and the money would be directly transferred to Zhang Hai's account. Generally speaking, when they arrived home, it was around 6 o'clock. If it was summer, the sky would be bright, but it was still winter, and the sky was not even bright. The sea was covered with fog, and only a trace of sunlight could be seen. Don't think that you can see the sunrise often just because you live by the sea all year round. To be honest, it's just like in the mountains. The time you can see the sunrise is very little because whether it's in the sea or in the mountains, the fog is very heavy. Zhang Hai had been here for more than 3 years. The number of sunrises he had seen could not be counted with his hands, but the number of times he had seen them was not too many. Basically, it was good to see the sunrise 1 or 2 days a month. Obviously, today was not such a day. Hey boss, you're up so early. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Edward Anderson also said with a smile, and then said to Zhang Hai. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also smiled and waved his hand. The two walked into the hut next to the dock. In this day, it was still quite challenging to stay outside, and it was far less comfortable than in a heated room. Some people said that Zhang Hai was a loser. When he was rich, he was a super loser. If Zhang Hai heard these words, he would say, "How can you tell?" Ahem. Well, in fact, Zhang Hai was a super loser. If he had the slightest ambition and drive, he could also rely on his ability to make more money and have more influence, but he didn't. I asked you to come here for one thing. Do you know where there are many sharks around us? Especially great white sharks, king squid, or giant spear squid. After pulling Edward Anderson into the hut, Zhang Hai also went straight to the point and asked him. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Edward Anderson hesitated for a moment. He knew where there were many great white sharks, and he also understood that Zhang Hai had some special abilities, which were far from what he could understand. However, he had to think about the giant spear squid because he really didn't know. I remember that there used to be a lot of great white sharks there, almost 30 or 40 of them, but after some were killed, they have rarely been seen recently, but I can be sure that there must be some there. As for the giant spear squid, king squid, boss, I really don't know. Looking at Zhang Hai, Edward Anderson first said to Zhang Hai. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also smiled awkwardly. In fact, he also took some things for granted. King squid, giant spear squid. These are all creatures living at the bottom of the sea. They don't need to breathe. Why would they come up? So not many people have seen them. But sperm whales feed on these things. Where there are sperm whales, there should be these creatures. But after thinking about it, Edward Anderson still suggested to Zhang Hai. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also nodded. Indeed, he can't find these guys, but it doesn't mean that other creatures can't find them, right? At least sperm whales, the natural enemy of squid, should not be a big problem. But where to find sperm whales? Zhang Hai also has some entanglements. Sperm whales are everywhere. As long as the water is not frozen, there will be traces of them. It's not difficult to find them. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Edward Anderson also said with a smile. Hearing what he said, Zhang Hai also nodded. It's a good thing to find them. Now he is afraid of another killer whale invasion, so now that he has determined sharks first, he will look for sharks first. As for the giant spear squid, it depends on the situation. Okay, then let's find a chance to go to Cape Cod soon. After thinking about it, Zhang Hai said to Edward Anderson. Hearing that Zhang Hai was going to Cape Cod, Edward Anderson naturally didn't care and nodded directly. But if they want to go to Cape Cod, Zhang Hai and the others have to hurry because it's going to be March soon. Zhang Hai will start to get busy, and there will be very few people who can leave by then. The fishermen need to start putting in the fry, and the land needs to start planting vegetables, tidying up lawns, and grazing cattle. At that time, Zhang Hai will have no extra manpower to accompany him to Cape Cod. Although Azalina and the others can accompany Zhang Hai all the time, there is a problem. You can let Azalina kill people, but how can you let her catch sharks? Haha, I'm thinking too much. This matter should be handled by Edward Anderson. After making the reservation with Edward Anderson, Zhang Hai went back and thought about it. He decided to go after Robbins Garcia and the others returned. Why must they wait for him to come back? This time, Zhang Hai was going to take Knerson Peters, Harriman Fells, Belle Lester, and Edward Anderson with him. Belle Lester was in charge of safety. Edward Anderson was in charge of finding ways to get fish, while the other two were in charge of catching fish. At this time, it was indeed a little inconvenient to bring some women along. Most importantly, Cape Cod was not far away. It was less than an hour's boat ride from the border of Zhang Hai's fishing ground. Don't forget that Zhang Hai expanded his fishing ground last year. This time, Zhang Hai was going to drive his own yacht. It had been a while since his yacht was used. After all, it cost Zhang Hai more than $5 million. It didn't seem good to just leave it there. After Zhang Hai made the decision, he waited for Robbins Garcia and the others to come back. Edward Anderson also had to arrange the rotation of the fishermen during his absence. As for Zhang Hai's women, they didn't care too much. After all, Zhang Hai was only going to Cape Cod, which was very close. Zhang Hai would be back in 2 or 3 days. They wouldn't go so far as to stop Zhang Hai from going for 2 or 3 days. Moreover, according to Zhang Hai, this was a serious matter. Time passed day by day. After another 4 days, Robbins Garcia and the others came back. They went with 2 cows, but when they came back, they only had 1 short-horned cow and a medal. Needless to say, the medal was still a gold medal. In first place, Zhang Hai's beef cow had no problem beating these guys. As for the cow, it also won a gold medal, but its ranking wasn't particularly high. After all, Zhang Hai had only reared it for 1 winter, not more than a year. Even so, Zhang Hai's milk still made a name for itself. Because purely based on the nutritional content, Zhang Hai's milk was worthy of being number 1. The cows in Australia and the cows in the Netherlands were not as nutritious as Zhang Hai's short-horned cow. After all, the grass that the short-horned cow ate was rich in aura. However, perhaps because it had only been reared for a short time, the taste of the milk wasn't very good. Therefore, although it also won a gold medal, its ranking wasn't particularly high. As for the beef cow, it was bound to beat everything. According to Robbins Garcia, they were actually having a smooth sailing. This year's San Antonio Livestock Show also had Japanese people participating. Naturally, they were also suppressed by Zhang Hai. However, those Japanese people were indeed very wretched. At first, they sent people to cause trouble, giving the cows chin and croton beans, but they were directly beaten by Harriman Fells and then thrown into the police station. Later, they also encouraged the American cowboys to ask why these cows were so good. According to them, they were also rearing cows. Why could Zhang Hai's cows be sold at such a high price? It was unfair. However, their plan didn't succeed because the most unfair thing was the beef cow. They didn't see Japan publicizing this method of raising beef. In addition, the United States was a country that paid attention to human rights and democracy, so such a thing didn't happen. Therefore, after dealing with these bastards along the way, they also brought back 2 gold medals for Zhang Hai. After Harriman Fells returned, Zhang Hai let him rest for 2 days. Then, he took the 4 people he had chosen to his yacht and drove directly to Cape Cod. These days, he was afraid that the killer whales would return. Whether it was the fishery or the land, Zhang Hai was quite interested in them. The most important thing was that he was a person with no sense of security. These days when his girls flirted with him, he was in a bad mood, let alone doing other things. Harriman Fells also knew that Zhang Hai was anxious, so after 2 days of rest, Zhang Hai waved his hand, and he followed him on the boat without any complaints. Because the place they were going to this time wasn't very far, Zhang Hai and the others prepared everything and had breakfast before leaving. Edward Anderson was the captain. He started the engine and rushed in the direction of Cape Cod. Chapter 971. Fishing, of course, did not refer to a specific place or law enforcement method, but it should be considered an outdoor sport. No one knew exactly how many years fishing had been around, but it was at least tens of thousands of years ago. At least before human civilization, Fishing with rods and fishing had already existed. The most famous one was during the last years of the Shang dynasty. There was a man named Lu Wang who used a straight hook to fish. He only caught nobles and generals. Later, this man was given the surname Jiang because of his achievements. He was the famous Jiang Zia. Yes, Jiang Zia's surname was not Jiang, but Lu. Jiang was one of the most ancient and noble surnames in Huaxia, because the origin of this surname was Shennong, the legendary Yan Emperor. The Yan Emperor was born in Jiang River, so he used the river as his surname and named himself Jiang. Of course, this had nothing to do with Jiang Hai, and as far as he knew, it had nothing to do with a certain author. He was just trying to count the number of words. No matter what, fishing was a skill passed down from ancient humans, and there were many people who had fished. Basically, taking China as an example, out of the 1.3 billion people, at least 1/3 of them had fished before. Children who were born in the countryside or grew up in the countryside must have fished before. Those who were born in the city must have gone to fishing ponds, reservoirs, and so on to play, and almost all of them had fished before. Although there were many people who had fished before, there were not many who really liked it. In all of Huaxia, 1 out of 100 people liked fishing, and that was about it. Don't think that this was a small proportion. One had to know that there were 1.3 billion people in Huaxia, and 1 out of 100 people liked fishing. That was 13 million people. The base of the country was too large, and no one could do anything about it. However, if 1 out of 100 people in Huaxia liked fishing, then in the United States maybe 1,000? Or 3,000? Or 5,000? Well, to be honest, there were not many people in the United States who liked fishing. As everyone knew, although the American government had been trying to change the eating habits of the American people to eliminate the overabundance of Asian carp in the river, the Americans just didn't eat it. No one could do anything about it. First, the United States was like Huaxia. In order to develop, they polluted a large area of land and water. Now that they had developed to a bottleneck, they could no longer develop quickly. They started to treat land pollution, air pollution, and water pollution. However, it had only been 20 to 30 years. Although the results were good now, the current middle-aged people knew how serious the pollution was back then. Because they were still young at that time, the middle-aged and old people would definitely not eat the fish in the river. In their eyes, it was polluted. Secondly, Americans don't like to eat fish with bones. If that's the case, people will say that all fish have bones. But in fact, if you take a closer look at American restaurants, you will understand that fish can also have no bones. This was because Americans didn't cook fish like Huaxia. They didn't fry it, stew it, or braise it. When Americans ate fish, they only ate fish steaks, fish balls, and the like. In other words, if a fish was cut from the left and the right, they would only eat the 2 pieces of meat. They would not eat the head or tail of the fish. Most river fish had bones, but many sea fish did not, such as cod, so they did not eat river fish. It was because of these 2 reasons that Americans didn't eat river fish. If someone beat the river fish into fish balls, they would eat it. However, they were worried that the fish meat was not clean, whether there was preservative in the fish balls, how long it had been stored, and so on. So to avoid these troubles, they decided not to eat river fish. If there wasn't a need, there wouldn't be a market. This was because no one ate river fish. So even if someone fished for river fish, it was just for fun. After catching a fish, they would throw it directly into the trash. But after playing for a long time, it was indeed meaningless. They still had to work. So in the United States, almost no one fished by the river. Just like hunting in the United States, fishing also required a license. Otherwise, if you were caught, you would go to jail. With these 2 conditions, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that there were very few people fishing in the United States. There were many people fishing by the sea. They would eat the fish they caught, but how many people lived by the sea? Most importantly, the income of Americans is quite high, and the price of sea fish is not very high in the United States. Under such circumstances, how many people know how to fish? There was a saying in the NBA. If a person didn't enter the playoffs or was eliminated from the playoffs, it was said that he went fishing. This was because in their view, fishing was equivalent to going on vacation. In the United States, there was only one kind of person who really worked hard to fish. This kind of person was called the ocean hunter by Edward Anderson. However, in the eyes of Zhang Hai and the others, they were fishermen. But this kind of fisherman was different from ordinary fishermen. Ordinary fishermen would buy a boat, either near or far, near their home or in the ocean. They would pull the net around and then come back to sell it. This was the traditional fisherman's way of doing things. As for these sea hunters, they were specialized in fishing. What they were eyeing were the precious fishes. For example, the legendary Atlantic bluefin marlin. Of course, yellowfin, masu, bigeye, and so on were not rejected by them. Every country had a limited time for tuna fishing. For example, in Canada, it was from August to October every year. The United States and Canada had always been in the same boat, so the time was about the same. Although Xueqi didn't have a specific time for tuna fishing, there was a sea ban every year from spring to autumn. This was the time for the fish in the sea to recuperate. Naturally, fishing was not allowed. But for some small countries, there was no such rule. For example, some countries in Japan and Southeast Asia could catch tuna all year round. As long as they were found in the sea, they could be caught. Mexico, which was the closest country to the United States, could catch tuna from January to November. The only time for them to recuperate was in December every year. Therefore, many ocean hunters drifted around during the year. They would stay in one country for a few months, and the next few months they would go to another country. For them, as long as they could catch tuna, they could go anywhere. And their income was much higher than the average fisherman. Think about it, if one day they were lucky and caught Atlantic bluefin marlin, it didn't need to be too big. It was more than 200 kilograms. Different parts of the Atlantic bluefin marlin had different prices. If they had to talk about the average price, it would be about $300 per kilogram. Of course, this referred to the price in the United States. If they went to China and Japan, the price would fly. The cheeks of a top-notch tuna in China were the best meat for 3,800 renminbi per tael, 20 taels per kilogram, and 76,000 renminbi per kilogram. In Japan, a tuna could be sold for millions of RMB, or even tens of millions of RMB. The premise was that you had to be big enough. But basically, it was not a problem to catch Atlantic bluefin marlin and sell it for $50,000 to $60,000. In addition to the other Atlantic bluefin marlin, the average annual income of these ocean hunters was at least $100,000. Moreover, they did not only catch Atlantic bluefin marlin. They also caught bluefin, sailfish, and so on. Therefore, the annual income of these ocean hunters was about $150,000 or more. In the United States, $50,000 was considered middle class. $150,000 was enough to attract a large number of people into this industry. But there were some problems in this industry. First, it depended on one's looks. You might earn $300,000 a year, or you might not earn a single cent. You might even have to pay for plane tickets and gas. So, the average income of the two of you would be $150,000 each. Secondly, it was not very safe. Japan was only a small place, and there were too many people catching fish. No one would go there. They would go to the high seas to catch fish. As for the other places, whether it was Southeast Asia or Mexico, there was no guarantee that if you sold Atlantic bluefin marlin, you would not be robbed on the way. Many people died in this industry every year, but no one could do anything about it. Humans die in pursuit of wealth, and birds die in pursuit of food. This was an eternal truth, and it was precisely because of this that many ocean hunters specifically stared at some safe places, such as Cape Cod and George Shoals in North America. Speaking of Cape Cod, it was a place that had a close relationship with the United States. This was because it was the first stop for European immigrants in America. Without this place, there would not be the United States or Canada. It was not an exaggeration to say that. It was not the season to catch tuna, so when Jiang Hai's ship arrived, the place was a little deserted. At the port of Woods Hole, when Jiang Hai's cruise ship sailed in, many people who were drying their fishing nets on the dock looked at Jiang Hai and his ship. Many young men and women's eyes were filled with envy and hope. Cape Cod was located in the gap between Massachusetts and New York. Politically, it belonged to Massachusetts, but it was precisely because of this that it wasn't very rich. Although it wasn't as prosperous as the legend said, the per capita income here wasn't high in Massachusetts. As the saying went, poor hills and turbulent rivers produce unruly people. Although the people here weren't unruly, there were many who wished to leave this place and yearned for the outside world. As Jiang Hai's yacht docked on the shore of the dock, many teenagers deliberately came over and surrounded it. They were waiting to tie the mooring rope, which was also their main way of collecting tips. Chapter 972. Catch. Zhang Hai picked a kid who looked more pleasing to the eye and threw the boat's rope over. The guy immediately caught the rope and firmly tied it to a pole in the distance. As the rope was tightened, Zhang Hai's boat slowly approached. As Edward Anderson anchored the boat here, Zhang Hai and the others also walked down the stairs. Because the boat must be guarded, only 3 people came down. Zhang Hai, Edward Anderson, and Knerson Peters. Bell Lester and Harriman Fell stayed on the boat. Good job, young man. After getting off the boat, Zhang Hai saw the kid who was standing in the distance rubbing his hands and helping him tie up the boat. Of course, he also knew the rules. He pulled out an Andrew Jackson, $20 bill from his pocket and stuffed it into the kid's hand. Looking at the tip Zhang Hai gave, the kid was so happy that his nose was about to burst. "Thank you, sir," he shouted excitedly as he stuffed the money into his pocket. "You deserve it. By the way, can you tell me where the best hotel in town is?" Looking at the kid's excited face, Zhang Hai said with a smile, "Come with me, sir." Hearing that Zhang Hai still had something to ask of him, the kid patted his chest and then led Zhang Hai to the town. Cape Cod was not far from Zhang Hai's home. If he took a speedboat, it would take about 3 hours to get there. If it was a fishing boat, it would take nearly 6 hours. Zhang Hai's yacht was slightly slower than a speedboat, but it was much faster, so it took about 3 hours to get there. This place was about 30 nautical miles away from his fishing ground. If it was an ordinary fishing boat, it would take more than an hour to get there, but Zhang Hai's yacht could not be used. Following the child, Zhang Hai quickly walked into the town. The town's buildings were quite old. There were no high-rise buildings, nor were there any scenes of heavy traffic. The entire town looked very old. The buildings in the town had a strong Gothic feeling. Of course, before coming, Edward Anderson had already told Zhang Hai that the buildings in the town could actually be regarded as cultural relics. Because the buildings in the town were basically built when Europeans immigrated to the United States. Cape Cod was originally called Cape Cod. Of course, it was still called Cape Cod now. Cape Cod was just a nickname. This place was first discovered in 1602. It was discovered by a fisherman. Well, the official name was Gosnold, an explorer. However, no one thought about why Gosnold had a ship full of cod. Regardless of whether it was to flatter these people or not, it was named Cape Cod because of that ship of cod. Later, in 1620, a group of murderers, pagans, and people who couldn't live anymore arrived here on the Mayflower. When there were people here, they naturally had to build houses. So, the pagans built these buildings with a strong Gothic style. Gothic architecture originated during the European Renaissance. It started in the 12th century and disappeared in the 16th century. During that time, Gothic architecture was no longer popular in Europe. The emerging forces even gave it a derogatory term, Gothic architecture. Yes, Gothic was the original name, and Goth was a derogatory term. So, if someone went to Europe and pointed at some buildings in France and said that they were Gothic architecture, they would probably be beaten. The town of Woodstock wasn't big, but there were about 400 people living there. Nearly 1/3 of the people living on the island were ocean hunters. Only 1/10 of this 1/3 of people would stay on the island all year round. As for the rest of the young people, they would not take the initiative to come back except during the months of August to October every year. The main income of this town came from tourism. After all, this was the birthplace of the United States. So every year, people would come here to take pictures and leave a memento. But because this place really wasn't that big, and there were more than 10 towns on Cod that had similar customs, it really wasn't that rich. But for this only source of income, they still insisted on the style of a small town. Well, in Zhang Hai's eyes, a cloudy day would look very gloomy. For Huaxia people, a Gothic style. Wasn't it the style of a haunted house or a haunted house? Well, Zhang Hai seemed to be wrong again, but he really didn't know much about this. Following the boy in front of him, Zhang Hai walked all the way to the middle of the town. There was a small square in the middle of the town, and in the middle of the square was a dried-up fountain. Around the square should be the town's business center. There were several hotels and bars. In the distant alley, there were some professional places where only men would go. It wasn't rare in America. When he brought Zhang Hai here, the boy excitedly pointed at the 3-story building called Toby George's Hotel in front of him and smiled at Zhang Hai. Needless to say, this should be the place. Sorry to trouble you. As he spoke, Zhang Hai gave him another $10 and then walked into the hotel. When he walked in, the first thing he saw was a hall similar to a bar and a staircase going upstairs. At this time, there were about 5 or 6 figures in the bar, divided into 3 groups. 2 tables were sitting at a table far away. When they heard Zhang Hai and the others coming in, they glanced at Zhang Hai, then turned their heads, indicating that they were not interested in Zhang Hai. "Hello, welcome, do you want to eat, drink, or stay?" The other person was a fat old man who was sitting in front of the bar watching TV. He had a cigarette in his mouth while talking to Zhang Hai and the others. But before Zhang Hai spoke, Edward Anderson said with a smile, "Hey, Toby." "Ha, AI Hua. I haven't seen you for a while." Hearing Edward Anderson's voice, the fat man couldn't help but turn his head in confusion. When he saw that it was Edward Anderson, he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. "That's right. I thought you were going to close down." Edward Anderson walked over and shook hands with the man, then patted him on the shoulder and said to him. Hearing Edward Anderson's words, the fat man named Toby also laughed. Obviously, he didn't care about Edward Anderson's joke. They often joke like this many years ago. "Don't worry. Before I die, this place will always be open for business. Are you here to stay or to have a meal? Or just to visit an old friend?" Looking at Edward Anderson, Toby asked with a smile. "Both. I'm here to stay, eat, and visit an old friend." Hearing Toby's words, Edward Anderson also said with a smile, then took the initiative to step back and introduce Toby to his boss, Zhang Hai. "Toby, this is my boss, Zhang Hai from Huaxia, Mr. Zhang." Hearing Edward Anderson introduce himself, Zhang Hai also said hello, then extended his hand. "Boy, I've heard of you. I hope you have a good time here. How many rooms do you want, and how many nights do you want to stay?" After shaking hands with Zhang Hai, Toby also said with a smile. In Massachusetts, there weren't many coastal residents who hadn't heard of Zhang Hai. "Let's get 3 rooms, 1 room with 1 bed, 2 rooms with 2 beds. The specific length of stay hasn't been decided yet, but I still need to trouble you to prepare some food for us while you tidy up the rooms." Hearing Toby's words, Zhang Hai also said with a smile, which was also what he and Edward Anderson had discussed on the boat just now. Zhang Hai and the others had a total of 5 people. Naturally, Zhang Hai had to live on the shore every day. Although the sea wasn't particularly shaky, it was still shaky. He was the boss, so he had the right to live on the shore. As for the remaining 4 people, they would swap beds in pairs. Today, 2 people would get off the boat, and the next day, another 2 people would get off the boat. Americans don't like to sleep in other people's beds. They are more particular about privacy, so Zhang Hai specifically asked for 2 beds. "Okay, no problem." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Toby also responded with a smile. "Cha Wei, you lazy bastard. Immediately tidy up the 3 best rooms for me. 1 room with 1 bed, 2 rooms with 2 beds. Guests are here, and you haven't done anything for so long. I'll fire you sooner or later. George, my old friend, AI Dehua has brought his boss over. Prepare a few dishes to greet them. Take a seat first." After Toby's voice fell, he directly shouted towards the 2nd floor. Hearing his shout, a sound came from the 2nd floor, followed by the sound of footsteps running quickly to the 3rd floor and starting to get busy. The kitchen also responded. Zhang Hai didn't feel uncomfortable with such a rough arrangement. He felt that it was best to not treat him as an outsider. Edward Anderson naturally knew Zhang Hai's habits, so he smiled and led Zhang Hai to an empty table. "Boss, you can try Old George's pineapple chicken with codfish in a while. The taste definitely won't disappoint you." After everyone sat down, Edward Anderson also said to Zhang Hai with a smile, "AI Dehua, since you know this place, why didn't you just bring us here?" Hearing Edward Anderson's words, Zhang Hai smiled, but then asked with some doubts. He had to spend $10 more. "Hey Zhang, you're the boss. You decide where we are, not anyone else." But after hearing Zhang Hai's words, Edward Anderson said seriously. Hearing what he said, Zhang Hai smiled. He likes such subordinates. Chapter 973. Not long after, a man wearing a greasy chef's coat came out of the kitchen with some food in his hand. "This is George. He opened this hotel with Toby. Toby paid for it. He used to be a chef, so he is responsible for cooking. Although he doesn't have any stars, the food he cooks is quite delicious. Seeing George coming out with food, Edward Anderson smiled and introduced him to Zhang Hai. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also looked at George's hand. George didn't prepare a meal for Zhang Hai. In fact, there weren't many people in the United States who were so particular about food, especially when eating these dry pieces of meat. If it was some soup, perhaps it would be separated. But when eating vegetables, there was not so much attention. The first thing that caught Zhang Hai's eyes was the so-called George's specialty dish, pineapple chicken and cod steak. The cooking method was very simple. The cod steak was fried, and the pineapple chicken was fried. Then they were placed on the plate. Next to them were two sauces. One was ketchup, and the other was sweet and spicy sauce. Of course, the secret was the pickling process. After the food was served, Zhang Hai picked up a fork and ate a piece. After chewing, Zhang Hai couldn't help but nod. As expected of an experienced chef, his control of the fire was really strong. The chicken and fish steak were a little crispy on the outside, but very soft on the inside. The juices in the meat were perfectly controlled. It didn't taste dry, but it was chewy, and the skin was very crispy. To be honest, Zhang Hai's taste was not much different from a child's. This kind of crispy and soft on the inside was his favorite. Together with the sweet and spicy sauce, the taste was quite good. Seeing Zhang Hai nod, old George also smiled and went back to work. After having a good lunch, Zhang Hai specially packed for 2 people. Don't forget that there were still 2 people on the ship. After delivering the food to them, Zhang Hai and the others returned to the small hotel and went into their own rooms. On the 3rd floor of the hotel, Zhang Hai and the others also saw Toby, the one who kept saying that he wanted to fire Xueqi. After Zhang Hai gave him a tip of $20, he went into his room. Although the hotel looked a bit shabby from the outside, Zhang Hai didn't mind at all. But after all, it was a tourist town and a summer city. Therefore, the hotel was quite good. The room was very big, and everything was very complete. There was heating, air conditioning. Of course, the current air conditioning could not be used. The bathroom was also very clean. There was a sofa, tables and chairs, a TV, and a big bed. Zhang Hai took a small nap here in the afternoon. After all, it was impossible not to feel dizzy after being on the ship for a few hours. It was good to adjust now. Before nightfall, Zhang Hai woke up and went downstairs to meet with Edward Anderson and the others. They had dinner in the hall, but then Edward Anderson took them to a nearby bar. They were not going there to have fun, but to ask for information. Creatures like great white sharks were not like tigers and lions on land. They had a fixed territory. Great white sharks ran around everywhere. As long as there was water, they would be there. Therefore, they would often run into them when you didn't want to, and when you wanted to find them, they couldn't be found. Now, they were going to the bar to ask if there were any great white sharks nearby. Although they were sure that there must be great white sharks nearby because this was Cape Cod. There were a lot of fish here. Where there was food, there must be predators, so there must be great white sharks here. However, it would be interesting to look for them at sea level. Where could they find them? This thing was not a whale that could spray water. It was quite troublesome to find the dorsal fin, so it was quite good to ask around and determine the specific location. Boss, go to the bar counter and ask around. I'll see if I know any old friends and ask them. After walking to the door of the bar, Edward Anderson deliberately said something to Zhang Hai, and the 3 walked into the bar. After entering the bar, Zhang Hai also nodded secretly. He was quite used to the environment here. Although it was called a bar, it was different from a disco. This was the kind of country bar. Like old Tony's cowboy song, it played more retro country music. Listening to these strange music that was not too noisy, Zhang Hai was not uncomfortable. He nodded along with the music and brought Knerson Peters to the bar counter. What would you like to drink? The little guy at the bar counter saw Zhang Hai coming over, raised his head, wiped the glass in his hand, and asked Zhang Hai. He used to entertain tourists often, so he was very familiar with this process, but now was not the time for tourists, so he was still a little surprised by Zhang Hai's arrival. A glass of whiskey, Knerson Peters. What do you want? Hearing the bartender's words, Zhang Hai asked Knerson Peters. Beer is fine, I still have to protect you. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Connerson Peters said in a muffled voice. The reason why Zhang Hai brought him and Harriman Fells out this time was, firstly, because of their strength and secondly, because of their loyalty to Zhang Hai. In this group, if Belle Lester had a 5% chance of betraying Zhang Hai, and Edward Anderson had a 3% chance of betraying Zhang Hai, then these two people may not even have a 1% chance. This is also Zhang Hai's confidence. A glass of whiskey, a glass of beer. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Zhang Hai said with a smile. Then the waiter over there poured a third of a glass of whiskey for Zhang Hai, put 3 ice cubes in it, and poured a glass of raw beer. Small shops like this all brewed their own beer. Their beer was not imported, so the taste of each shop's beer was different. In the United States there was a group of people who liked to drink beer, and they would look for small shops like this to drink beer from all over the country. Zhang Hai took the whiskey, and then stuffed a $20 bill into the box next to him. According to the price of such a small shop, a glass of whiskey was about $5 or $6, and a glass of beer was about $2 or $3. In the United States, tips were basically 10% or 20%. For someone like Zhang Hai who directly gave double the tip, he must be inquiring about something. These waiters were still very used to it. Seeing Zhang Hai give him $20, the waiter propped himself up and looked at Zhang Hai, waiting for him to ask a question. Excuse me, which part of the sea has more great white sharks? Zhang Hai asked the waiter after taking a sip of the whiskey. That thing runs around all day long, and no one knows where it is. However, the fishing grounds of the Soaring Dragon Manor are about 30 nautical miles away from here. The fish there are quite delicious, so occasionally, some great white sharks will wander around Zhang Hai's fishing grounds in order to catch fish that accidentally come out of the fishing grounds. If you follow that line, you may see great white sharks, but you have to pay attention to the people of the Soaring Dragon Manor. They are very strict about their own territory. If you are discovered, then you have to run away quickly. Their water cannons won't be merciful. Hearing Zhang Hai's question, the waiter didn't care. After all, there were people who came to see great white sharks every year, and he just casually mentioned it. However, after hearing his words, Zhang Hai was somewhat embarrassed. Hearing someone else say that he had to be careful of his manner made him feel a little strange, even though it wasn't anything good. Thank you. However, even if it wasn't anything good, the waiter was kind, so Zhang Hai still thanked him and continued to drink. Not long after, Edward Anderson also came back. The news he heard was similar to what Zhang Hai heard. He also said that great white sharks might be seen around Zhang Hai's fishing grounds. As for why these sharks didn't enter the fishing grounds, others may not know, but Zhang Hai certainly knew. It was because of Big Fool. Big Fool was now bigger than the average killer whale. The general size of a great white shark was about 6 meters. Compared with Big Fool, who was almost 10 meters tall, it was really a lot worse. Big Fool and his wife, 2 sharks, and a dozen dolphins wandered in that sea area. These great white sharks couldn't beat them, but they were reluctant to leave. Naturally, they could only wander around nearby. In addition, great white sharks were stupid enough. They didn't have any social awareness. Like killer whales, they were all lone wolves. If they encountered great white sharks, even without Big Fool, they would have to determine the winner first. Therefore, although these great white sharks were powerful, in the eyes of Edward Anderson and Zhang Hai, they were not a force to worry about. It was also beneficial to keep this force. Just like now, didn't Zhang Hai come over to recruit them? The news brought back by Edward Anderson was almost the same as what Zhang Hai heard, so the two sat at the bar to study it. After determining the route for tomorrow, they left the bar and returned to the hotel to have a good sleep. Early the next morning, Zhang Hai and Edward Anderson had breakfast. Then they boarded the boat and sailed to the side of Zhang Hai's fishing grounds. Today was the day to hunt great white sharks. Maybe God also felt that Zhang Hai would have some harvest today, so there was no fog on the sea. It was a sunny day. Facing the wind and waves, Zhang Hai's boat quickly sailed to the border of his fishing grounds. Chapter 974. Boss, we're here. Looking at the floating signal balls in the distance, Belle Lester put down his hand and said with a smile. Although Zhang Hai's fish farm did not have a net fence at the periphery, Edward Anderson deliberately placed some floating signal balls at the periphery to tell the fishermen that this was the border. If they dared to come over, they would be trespassing on the private fish farm. Admittedly, Edward Anderson's move was not bad. Plus, There were satellite surveillance and radio signals all day long. Some people who did not want to steal fish, or those who wanted to steal fish, but were timid, would stay away from this place. Of course, there were also some shameless people who scolded Zhang Hai for being shameless. In their eyes, the ocean belonged to everyone, and it was also their home. Zhang Hai surrounded the fish farm and caught the fish himself. That was the most shameless move. What? Zhang Hai spent money to buy it? He didn't pay for it, so why did they say he bought it? There were indeed many people in the United States who had such thoughts. After all, this kind of logic and thinking was popular in this country. However, those who had such thoughts were basically honest now. Since the end of last year's naval battle, very few people dared to steal fish near Zhang Hai's waters. Even if they did, they would use small speedboats to catch fish, or use hand nets to steal in the dark. The losses were very small. The most important thing was that these people did not encounter Big Fool and the others. If they were patrolling, they would definitely lose their fishing nets and rods. If they were too greedy, they might not even be able to keep their boats and people. Perhaps because Zhang Hai's fish farm was so evil, in the past 6 months or so, very few people came to fish here, giving the fish a period of time to recuperate. According to Edward Anderson, according to the ship's sonar, there were a lot of fish nearby. Although there were not as many fish as Zhang Hai's fish farm, the number was still considerable. After driving along Zhang Hai's floating line for about 5 hours, Zhang Hai and the others arrived at the head of Zhang Hai's fish farm. About 50 nautical miles to the south was the territory of New York. It was obvious that Zhang Hai's fish farm was really large. After arriving at the place, Zhang Hai and the others began to prepare. After a simple lunch, Zhang Hai and the others took out the large pieces of cow internal organs that they had prepared. The cow internal organs were freshly killed before departure, and they were frozen in the ship. Americans almost didn't eat internal organs, but they also knew that these things were quite good for fishing. Originally, internal organs had a miraculous effect when fishing. In addition, these were the internal organs of Zhang Hai's beef cattle, which contained spiritual energy, so the effect was naturally stronger. Because they were going to catch great white sharks, Zhang Hai and the others also made the internal organs of these cows big, tied them to the ship with the thickest fishing line, and then threw these internal organs into the water. Although the weather was still a little cold, the moment the internal organs were thrown into the water, countless seemingly lazy fish swarmed up and began to peck at them. Zhang Hai looked down from the bow of the ship. Wow, he had to admit that the fishing resources nearby were really good. There were all kinds of fish. Barracuda, sea bass, bream, cod, herring, mackerel, shorefish, scorpion, and even some wild salmon were all pecking at the internal organs. Looking at these fish, Edward Anderson was also a little envious. He lifted the internal organs up, and then threw the net down, catching 2 Atlantic salmon that were about 10 kilograms in weight. After throwing them on the ship, he cleaned up. There was finally a dish to go with wine in the evening. After digging out the internal organs, he threw the fish into the frozen storage, and then watched the fish eat the internal organs happily. Soon, this piece of internal organs was eaten up. They also knew that they couldn't rush fishing, so Edward Anderson put another piece in. This time it should be a reward. Because when the internal organs were just put in, these fish were still eating crazily, but suddenly, most of the fish were stunned for a moment, and then many of them swam away quickly. In the distance, on the sea level, a dorsal fin stood up. "It's coming, be careful." Looking at the dorsal fin, Edward Anderson also said loudly, and then retreated to the ship with everyone. Zhang Hai's yacht was a large yacht with 8 rooms. It was far from something that sharks or killer whales could carry, so they were not worried about this. But if they exposed their heads, sharks would also jump. If they bit Zhang Hai, it would be troublesome. Just as Zhang Hai and the others retreated, the shark also accelerated and rushed over quickly. It went up and bit directly on the internal organs, but before it could swallow, the huge hook had already hooked its mouth. In pain, this guy also jumped out of the water and wanted to break free, but it was stuck by the barb. Good luck, the first shot hit. Looking at the shark that jumped up, Edward Anderson grinned. There were quite a lot of large shark species. In addition to the great white shark, there were many sharks, such as tiger sharks, gray mako sharks, hammerhead sharks, bull sharks, and so on. So although Zhang Hai and the others were fishing for sharks, they were not sure whether they were fishing for the great white shark they wanted. Of course, some other sharks were also possible, except for the tiger shark. Because this shark was too stupid, as long as it had a little IQ, Zhang Hai also had the possibility of domesticating it, but the brain of this shark was estimated to be similar to that of a worm. It was too stupid, and Zhang Hai had no way to domesticate it. In fact, most sharks were very stupid. Their brains were only the size of soybeans, and they lived more or less according to their instincts. Why did Zhang Hai want to catch a great white shark? It was because this shark was relatively smart, unlike tiger sharks that would swallow anything. When a great white shark attacks humans, it doesn't like to eat humans. Most of the time, it would treat humans like seals. Therefore, it would take a bite, and when it feels that something is wrong, it would let go. This can be considered as a sign of intelligence. Zhang Hai's luck was good. The first shark he caught was a typical great white shark, with a white belly, gray body, and small eyes. Edward Anderson had dealt with this creature many times. In the beginning, fishermen hated this shark because this creature would attack the fishermen, and at the very least, it would eat the fish caught by the fishermen, causing a certain amount of losses. At the same time, it was also impossible to eat it. Sharks did not have a bladder, and once it died, its urine would enter the meat. No matter how fast you killed it, the shark's meat would have a foul smell. Therefore, no one in the West ate this kind of fish. It was not until huaxia restaurants opened all over the world that the fishermen changed their view of this kind of creature. Huaxia restaurants had ways to get rid of the fishy smell, and shark fin was a great tonic. Naturally, sharks went from an existence that was hated by others to an existence that everyone liked. Therefore, the number of these guys decreased rapidly. Although the United States did not prohibit others from hunting sharks, all huaxia restaurants, or restaurants that served shark's fin, were not allowed to serve shark's fin alone, only whole sharks. This greatly reduced the misfortune of sharks being slaughtered. This was because no one would catch a whole shark, freeze it, and then sell it. This was really a bit difficult. In addition, environmental protection organizations were always looking for trouble. Now, except for some Japanese and African ships, there were very few people who would hunt sharks. At least, Zhang Hai, as the owner of the manor, had not eaten shark's fins seriously many times. Control it, let it jump, and consume its strength. Although Zhang Hai was a little dazed when he saw the shark in front of him, Edward Anderson was very clear-headed. He immediately pulled the thickest fishing line, and then said to Knerson Peters and Harriman Fells behind him. The two people's reactions were not slow. They immediately came over and pulled the line, one tight and one loose. When the shark was downstream, they had to release the line as much as possible. When the shark was a little annoyed and jumped out of the water, they had to pull the line back and let the shark fall back into the water again. The shark's brain was not very good, which was why they dared to do this. The first shark that Zhang Hai caught was not very big, about 3 meters long. It was still in the state of immaturity, so it was not very good in strength or endurance. In less than 20 minutes, it was finished. Edward Anderson, Knerson Peters, and Harriman Fells pulled it to the side of the boat. Then Zhang Hai came over, and everyone turned it over. When the shark turned over, it would enter a state of static. Although they did not know why it was true. Some people said that this was because when a shark flipped over, the world it saw would be reversed. It would be very scared, and its brain would secrete a chemical component to make it fall into a coma. Some people said that this was called forced stillness. But in any case, it was indeed true. Zhang Hai looked at the shark that could not move at all except for opening its mouth to drink water. He smiled and then put his hand on its belly. As the spiritual energy in Zhang Hai's body surged, a piece of spiritual energy disappeared into Zhang Hai's body and entered the shark. In an instant, Zhang Hai felt that there was some connection between him and the shark. From today on, you will be called Big White. Ah, not good. There is a Xiao Bai at home, so you will be called First White. Patting the belly of the great white shark, Zhang Hai said with a smile. His navy has expanded again. Chapter 975. Oh, you're back. How was your day? Seeing Zhang Hai walk into the hotel with Belle Lester and Harriman Ferns, old Toby couldn't help laughing and talking, and Zhang Hai also got along well with this old man after yesterday's interaction. Not bad, haha. Thinking of his harvest today, Zhang Hai couldn't help but laugh. It's good that the harvest is good, but I have to advise you, it's better to take it easy. If you attract the coastal patrol or the people from the fishery administration, it will be troublesome. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Toby couldn't help but whisper to Zhang Hai. Ah! What does this have to do with the Fishery Administration and the Coastal Patrol? Hearing his words, Zhang Hai looked at him with some doubts. Aren't you catching sharks and bluefin tuna? Hearing Zhang Hai's doubtful words and his sincere eyes, Toby couldn't help but be stunned. Then he looked at him with some doubts. Who said that? Isn't this bullshit? Hearing his words, Zhang Hai, Belle, and Harriman behind him looked at each other. Ha! Aren't you asking about where to see great white sharks? Also, this is the place where bluefin tuna is produced. Don't tell me you're just here for fun. Hearing Zhang Hai's puzzled words, Toby smiled. He felt that he was almost fooled by Zhang Hai. This guy was asking about great white sharks in the bar yesterday. Almost many people in the town know about it. This is not a secret. Asking about great white sharks, he's not just here for fun. He must have some ulterior motives. They are right, Zhang Hai does have ulterior motives, but unfortunately, they don't know what Zhang Hai is planning. Aren't you accusing us wrongly? I really have nothing to do. I live nearby, but I've never seen a great white shark before. That's why I brought some people out. I wanted to see the great white sharks and see how big the biggest one is. That's all. Today, I caught 3 great white sharks, but I let them go after taking a look. This can be proven by the video camera on my ship. Shaking his head helplessly, Zhang Hai shrugged and said to Toby with a speechless face. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Toby was also a little confused. His sixth sense told him that Zhang Hai might be true. After all, he knows Zhang Hai's ship. If he just came to steal shark fin and tuna, he shouldn't be able to afford such a ship. Okay, what do you want to eat tonight? In fact, this matter has nothing to do with him, so he just smiled indifferently and asked Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai also looked at Belle and Harris. I want to eat meat. Seeing Zhang Hai's gaze, Belle Lester was the first to speak. I want to eat cod. Hearing Belle speak, Harriman Fells smiled and said with a muffled voice. According to the former secretary, Harriman Fells didn't have a good life when he was young. He often freeloaded food from other families in the town. Compared to beef, frozen cod was cheap and delicious, so he preferred fish to beef. I want to eat shrimp. Tell Uncle George to do as he sees fit. After thinking for a moment, Zhang Hai said to old Toby. Hearing that Zhang Hai and the others finished ordering, old Toby walked to the kitchen and told old George about Zhang Hai's request. Then, the kitchen began to get busy again. Not long after, dishes were served, and Zhang Hai and the others had a good meal. After dinner, the 3 went back to sleep. Tonight, they didn't need to deliver food to Edward Anderson and the others. This was because they ate on the ship. Compared to Belle and Harriman Fells, Edward Anderson was a good cook. After all, he lived alone for so long, and he often went to sea in the past. Therefore it was inevitable that he had good skills. When Zhang Hai and the others got off the ship, he was almost done. The salmon was made into sashimi and fried. With Edward Anderson around, Zhang Hai didn't have to worry about them going hungry. The next morning, after Zhang Hai and the others had breakfast, they went to sea again. This time, they sailed to the southernmost part of Zhang Hai's fishing farm. Great white sharks weren't stupid. Although the overflowing spiritual energy in the fish farm made them drool, they preferred to live in warmer waters. Although Massachusetts and New York were close to each other, New York was warmer than Massachusetts. Therefore, great white sharks usually lived in this area. At least, Edward Anderson was very clear about this. The ship arrived here at noon. Zhang Hai and the others had a simple meal of fish noodle soup, and then they started to work. Fishermen on the sea liked eating noodle soup very much. Firstly, it was convenient, and secondly, it tasted good. Although it was stewed messily, it warmed the body up after eating it. In addition, it also replenished the body with enough water. The seafood was freshly caught. As long as there were enough ingredients, the taste wouldn't be bad. Most importantly, there were many vegetables in it. The scariest disease on an ocean voyage was scurvy, which was caused by eating less fruits and vegetables. If you want to eat vegetables alone, you have to stir-fry them. Most importantly, there are very few people who like to eat them. Americans are carnivores. Under such circumstances, putting them in a pot of stew is a good choice. Zhang Hai has suffered before, so he can be said to be a super loser. He likes to eat the best beef. He also likes to eat this thing. He also likes to eat it. After watching the ship sail to the place, Edward Anderson said to Zhang Hai, "Boss, let's get started. Drive a little bit further. We'll do it after we reach our territory." Zhang Hai thought for a moment and said to Edward Anderson. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Edward Anderson looked at Zhang Hai with some doubts. He didn't understand why Zhang Hai wanted to sail to his territory, but it didn't matter. It wasn't too far away, so he quickly turned the steering wheel and entered Zhang Hai's territory. As soon as he entered, the radio over there rang. "Attention, attention. You are now entering private waters. Please report your identity, otherwise, we will expel you." Hearing the voice on the radio, Edward Anderson couldn't help but smile and pull up the radio. "Tommy, you bastard, look carefully, this is the boss ship, it's us." Pressing the button, Edward Anderson shouted loudly, and hearing Edward Anderson's words, Tommy Charles on the other side also dragged his voice awkwardly. "Well, I said I didn't wake up just now. I don't know if the boss will believe me." Hearing Tommy Charles's words, the people on the ship laughed. After chatting for a while, they began to fish for sharks. Because of yesterday's success, they didn't have anything to worry about this year. They put down the fresh beef innards and waited for the shark to come up. Soon, a nearly 5-meter-long great white shark took the bait. Compared to the 4-meter-long ones they caught yesterday, this guy was much more difficult to deal with. This guy kept circling around Zhang Hai's boat, trying to pull off the hook, jumping up and down, flipping back and forth. This fish tossed and turned for nearly an hour before it stopped. Then it was pulled to the side of the boat. After Zhang Hai touched it, he threw it back into the sea. The great white shark that entered the water rested for about 5 minutes under the water, then plunged into Zhang Hai's fishing ground. But if it was before yesterday, it would have eaten a lot of food when it entered the fishing ground. But this time, it lived peacefully with most of the fish. Unless the fish happened to block its path, it would eat it, otherwise, it wouldn't take the initiative to hunt. In the distance, the silly couple and the dolphins were also moving forward. But in the same way, after these Marines saw this guy, they didn't pay attention to him and let him enter the hinterland. After entering the hinterland, this big guy converged with the great white shark 3 days ago. After these 4 sharks converged, they began to patrol in the opposite direction of Zhang Hai's ship. If they encounter a fish, they will eat it. If they don't, they will continue to swim. If there are some large fish outside the range of the fishing ground, they will rush over and bite it. Then they will drive most of the fish into Zhang Hai's fishing ground, and a small part of the fish will naturally enter their stomach. When this shark began to patrol, Zhang Hai waited for more than half an hour before the next shark was hooked, but unfortunately, this shark was a tiger shark. Zhang Hai thought for a moment. After pulling the shark over, he was ready to release it, but before releasing it, he must take out the hook, otherwise, the shark will be infected. However, just as Zhang Hai and the others tired the shark and turned it over, 3 boats quickly rushed over. "This is the coastal patrol, the boats in front. Please stop all movements and accept the investigation." Before they arrived, the loudspeaker and radio sounded together. Looking at the 3 boats rushing over, Edward Anderson glanced at Zhang Hai, then quietly gave Zhang Hai a thumbs up. He was also thinking, how did Zhang Hai know that these guys will come over? Looking at these guys, Zhang Hai couldn't help but smile. It seems that his guess was indeed correct. Just as Zhang Hai and the others put down the work in their hands, the 3 boats also approached. Zhang Hai knew 2 of the boats. One was the coastal patrol. Zhang Hai often dealt with them, and their relationship was good. One of the boats belonged to the Fishery Administration, which was responsible for managing individual fishermen. The other boat was filled with ordinary people. They wore ordinary clothes, but there was a black mark on the right side of their necks. Chapter 976. After these people got off the boat, they directly boarded Zhang Hai's yacht. While walking here, they kept taking photos, including Zhang Hai's group who were stroking sharks. Seeing them taking photos there, Zhang Hai was a little unhappy and frowned. As soon as he frowned, Cornelison Peters, who was behind him, stood up at once. Seeing Cornelison Peters coming over, the person who was taking photos was still pressing the shutter. Cornelison Peters directly snatched the camera away. You, what are you doing? We have the permission to shoot and the right to know. Only you are allowed to do it. but we are not allowed to expose it? Looking at his camera being taken away, the people here shouted loudly, but Connaughton Peters ignored him. Even if he had 10 times the courage, he would not dare to rush over. Instead, he directly handed the camera to Zhang Hai. You have the permission to shoot? I don't remember giving you such a privilege. After taking the SLR camera, Zhang Hai directly took out the memory card from it, then in front of them, he crushed it into several pieces and threw it into the sea. Don't you care? Looking at Zhang Hai throwing his work into the sea, this person's face turned green. One must know that in the memory card, there were not only the photos taken just now, there were a lot of other things. These people were from the World Animal Protection Association. Looking at the black label on their mouth, they knew that there were English animals written on it. However, the World Animal Protection Association was not a very official organization. Although the head was official, most of the people who joined were people who originally had their own jobs, either to pick up girls or really like animals, or for other reasons they joined here. For example, this guy used to be a cameraman. His main job was to take pictures of young models and so on. There were many of his masterpieces in the memory card. Now he was finished. But looking at the size of Zhang Hai and Connaughton Peters, he didn't dare to come over to pick a fight. He could only look at the Coastal Patrol and shout at them. But the Coastal Patrol looked at Zhang Hai at this time, a little embarrassed. Mr. Zhang, is this your boat? Hearing Zhang Hai's gaze, the people on his side couldn't just stand there. After hesitating for a moment, the captain of the team came over and said to Zhang Hai with a smile on his face. It's mine. I remember I registered it. Hearing the captain's words, Zhang Hai also said with a smile. Zhang Hai was deeply influenced by his country. Although it was said that in the United States, the rich were the father, Zhang Hai was still very used to having a good relationship with officials, especially these violent institutions. Therefore, he couldn't say that he bribed the Winthrop Police Department, the Boston Police Department, and the Massachusetts Police Department, including the Coastal Patrol. He could only say that he donated a lot of money to them. Among them, Zhang Hai donated a total of $12 million to the Winthrop Police Department in 3 years. It could be said that the Winthrop Police Department had everything from people to horses to weapons, and ammunition had Zhang Hai's money on it, as well as Zhang Hai's taxes. Therefore, the Winthrop Police Department was similar to Zhang Hai's servants. In Boston, Zhang Hai donated $3 million, and Massachusetts donated $8 million. This was a small amount of money for Zhang Hai, but it also made the police look at Zhang Hai with 2 million points of respect. In Massachusetts, in a simple police agency, Zhang Hai's fart might be more effective than the governor's. This was American politics. It was the same for the Coastal Patrol. In order to ensure the safety of his coastal area, Zhang Hai donated $6 million to the Coastal Patrol in 3 years, including 10 helicopters and 5 fast boats. The boat just now seemed to have been donated by Zhang Hai. When they saw Zhang Hai, they couldn't do anything other than laugh dryly. Now that they heard Zhang Hai's question, they couldn't do anything other than smile. Looking at their appearance, the other two groups knew that they couldn't rely on these guys. Zhang Hai was truly their parent. When they saw Zhang Hai, they couldn't do anything other than laugh dryly. Now that they heard Zhang Hai's question, they couldn't do anything but smile. Cut the crap. Who allowed you to fish here? How dare you fish for sharks? Someone reported you for illegal fishing and fishing for shark fins. Take out your fishing permits and search inside. If you find shark fins, detain this boat. Seeing that the Coastal Patrol was unreliable, the people from the Environmental Protection Agency looked at the people from the Fishery Administration. It turned out that the people from the Fishery Administration were really awesome. Seeing that the Coastal Patrol didn't stand up for them, one of the people from the Fishery Administration stepped forward and said arrogantly, "Search the boat? Let's see who dares." As soon as this person finished speaking, many people prepared to search the boat. However, Harriman Fells and Connaughton Peters were not to be trifled with. They stood up instantly and blocked these people. These people looked at the 2 iron towers in front of them and unconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Then, they looked at the Coastal Patrol. The people from the Fishery Administration were also equipped with guns, but now that the Coastal Patrol was present, they didn't dare to take them out. Hey, let them search. It's like we're really fishing for shark fins. Let them search. Ai Dehua, take out our fishing permits. Seeing that they were ready to fight, Jiang Hai smiled and asked the two people to continue holding down the sharks. Then, he walked in front of these people and motioned to Edward Anderson to take out the fishing permits. Humph, at least you know how powerful we are. Search for me. Seeing that Jiang Hai gave in, this person also shouted loudly. Search, it doesn't matter. You can even smash this boat, but I have to make it clear first. Do you see those floating boats over there? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. Then, he pointed to the floating boats in the distance and said to these people in front of him. Looking at the floating boats that Jiang Hai pointed to, these people also looked over. The guy from the Fishery Administration who was the leader felt his heart skip a beat. See. Let me tell you, the area circled by the buoy is my fishing ground. That is to say, where you are now is within the scope of my fishing ground. According to the laws of the United States, this ocean is mine. Looking at these people in front of him, Jiang Hai continued to say with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, this person felt his heart beat twice for no reason. The United States was indeed particular. Fishing required a fishing permit, but there were exceptions. If the river or the sea belonged to someone else, then it was his property. He could do whatever he wanted with it. It was like someone bought a house in Huaxia and then made bread and dumplings in his home. As a result, the government came. What right did he have to make dumplings? What about the new year? Who allowed him to make dumplings? Was it inexplicable? Not to mention that Jiang Hai was fishing here. Even if he caught all the fish here, it had nothing to do with them, because this was Jiang Hai's. I am a reasonable person. I'm a very reasonable person. You've entered my fishing grounds without a search warrant. You'll definitely lose your job and lose your job. I'll definitely sue you until you lose your job. Now, let's see if you can find the shark's fin that you're talking about. If you can find it, you'll just lose your job because this sea belongs to me. If you can't find it, then you're framing me. Let's not talk about other things, but you'll definitely have to go to jail. Looking at the people from the Fishery Administration, whose faces were already quite ugly, Jiang Hai continued to say with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, this person's legs went soft. He knew that he was finished. He looked at the two groups of people behind him for help. The coastal patrol team naturally pretended not to see it. Now, even if Jiang Hai asked them to testify, they would testify for Jiang Hai. These people from the Fishery Administration had nothing to do with them. As for the people from the Animal Protection Association, many of them took a step back. Now, these people were cursing in their hearts. What the hell? What the hell was this? How did this place become someone else's? This person was fishing in his own home. Even if there were poisonous fish, it had nothing to do with them. This time, they even brought people from the Fishery Administration and the Coastal Patrol team. This time, they had completely offended these people. We are not from the Fishery Administration. You can't threaten us. You are a murderer. Whether you find shark's fin here today or not, you will be condemned by your conscience. Don't tell me you don't know that 8 killer whales died here a few days ago. Just when this person from the Fishery Administration was completely disheartened, a person from the Animal Protection Association stood up and said in a sharp voice. Hearing this person's voice, Jiang Hai also looked at this person. This person was a woman who looked young. Because she was very short, about 1.5 meters tall, she was dressed like a junior high school student. Looking at this girl, Jiang Hai raised his eyebrows, then looked at his subordinates and laughed. Little kid, you have to understand one thing. You're standing on my territory now. Don't say that you have a bad conscience. What you're doing now is trespassing. Do you know what happened the last time someone trespassed on my territory? He was sunk to feed the fish. Looking at the girl in front of him, Jiang Hai grinned and said to the girl with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, a trace of fear flashed in the girl's eyes, but she soon stood firm. You are lawless. You will be condemned by your conscience, you villain. Facing Jiang Hai, the girl spurted. Listening to her words, Jiang Hai picked his ears. It was inexplicable. He could only say these words now, because it was really inexplicable. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai decided to ignore this guy. At this moment, those people who went in to search came out. Unfortunately, they didn't find any shark's fin. Instead, they found some fish that Edward Anderson had just caught. They didn't know what Jiang Hai said to their leader after they went in. In their view, it was inevitable to take something from Zhang Hai, because it was also called evidence. But as soon as they came out, they found that the atmosphere seemed to be a bit strange. Oh, another charge. It seems that you have to live in there for 3 to 5 years. Looking at the fish in their hands, Zhang Hai couldn't help but laugh. These guys really cooperated with him. Chapter 977. What are you doing? What are you holding in your hands? Hearing Zhang Hai's words and looking at the things in his hands, the man from the administration of fishery was about to go crazy. He roared loudly. His subordinates were also a little confused. Boss, isn't this evidence? After hearing his words, an old man who might be on good terms with him followed him with some doubts. They used to do this every time. Evidence, my ass. I asked you to look for shark's fins. Where are the shark's fins? This is his own fishing ground. What does it have to do with you what he wants to catch? Why do you care what kind of fish he has in his boat? If you want to die, don't drag me down with you. Looking at his subordinates, Yu Zheng's veins bulged as he roared loudly. Hearing his roar, most of his subordinates were in a daze. However, some of them were quick-witted. Their hearts instantly thumped as they exclaimed, "We're finished!" They had never expected that this fishing ground belonged to Zhang Hai, so everything here belonged to Zhang Hai. Not to mention that they didn't find any shark's fins. Even if they did, it would be useless, because the shark also belonged to Zhang Hai. This led to a very awkward situation. They went to other people's territory, checked their fishing permit, and then took away some fish, saying that this was evidence? At the thought of this, the subordinates who were searching the fishing ground almost slapped their own mouths. What was this? Did they kick an iron plate? No, this time they directly kicked an iron plate, and their bones were fractured. You don't have to scream so miserably. You have to check your fishing permit when you enter private property. Dereliction of duty. You will lose your job by 1,000,000%. You framed me, stole my fish, framed me and stole. You may have heard that my lawyer is called Moses Adams. He's a good lawyer. With such conclusive evidence, it's quite reasonable for you to be sentenced to 3 to 5 years. Looking at the people from the administration of fisheries in front of him, Zhang Hai said with a smile. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, these people from the administration of fishery felt a chill in their hearts. They knew that this time, they would lose their jobs and have to go to jail. No one doubted Zhang Hai's words, because they knew where this place was, and they had heard of Zhang Hai. It was just that they didn't think that way at first. Who was Zhang Hai? A billionaire? Why would a billionaire fish for sharks on a boat like a fisherman? But now the situation was that this was Zhang Hai, so they were doomed. Clang! Some people couldn't stand it anymore. They threw down the things in their hands and lay on the ground with a defeated face. Hey, don't, you can't stand it? I didn't say that I would bribe the prisoners in the prison to teach you a lesson. This is just the beginning. I am the most benevolent person. If you are wrong, you have to admit it. If you are beaten, you have to stand up straight. It's that simple. Looking at these people whose faces were as pale as ashes, Zhang Hai shook his head and smiled. Their mental fortitude was too weak. Mr. Zhang, please be merciful. Seeing Zhang Hai scaring these people to death, the head of the coastal patrol team couldn't help but lick his lips, then hesitantly walked over and whispered to Zhang Hai, "Mr. Zhang, please be merciful." But before he could finish, Zhang Hai interrupted him directly, "Shut up. Who are you talking to now? Are you speaking to me on behalf of your entire coastal patrol team?" Looking at this person, if the coastal patrol team didn't say anything, Zhang Hai might not say anything because there would be opportunities to cooperate in the future. But now, he actually dared to plead for mercy. Did he think that he was doing the right thing? Sorry, I was reckless. When this person heard Zhang Hai's words, he immediately retreated. They couldn't even save themselves. How dare they plead for mercy for others? Zhang Hai wouldn't be polite to them. Okay, take the fish away. I have plenty here. Go back and have a good meal. Then, wait for the court summons. It should arrive in a few days. Pay attention to your mailbox. Looking at the people from the fishery administration, who looked as if their mother had died, Zhang Hai said casually. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, most of these people's faces turned ashen. Americans didn't have the habit of saving money. Basically, More than 70% of Americans had loans from banks. They had loans for houses, cars, and everything else. In a situation where the economic conditions were not good, the fishery administration was a relatively stable job with a good income. Now, Zhang Hai's lips moved, and they lost their jobs and had to go to jail. That meant they were directly bankrupt. Because they didn't have the money to pay off their mortgage, their houses would be taken back by the bank. If they didn't have the money to pay off their car loans, their cars would disappear, and they would go to jail. It could be said that it was inevitable that their families would be ruined. Thinking of this, many people felt sad. Looking at Zhang Hai, the person who caused them all these troubles, they wanted to drag Zhang Hai down with them. But looking at the people around him and the coastal patrol, these people swallowed a mouthful of saliva. They knew that they had no way to take revenge. God, it was really unfair. People were like this. It was easy to forgive oneself, but difficult to forgive others. Although Zhang Hai couldn't be said to have a heart of stone, these guys came to find trouble with him, so he definitely wouldn't be lenient. Looking at these people's behavior, he knew that these guys had done this kind of thing before. Now that Zhang Hai had dealt with them, he wouldn't be the least bit lenient. If it wasn't Zhang Hai today, but some ordinary people, they could only suffer in silence. Their things would be confiscated, they would be fined, and they would even have to go to jail for a while. At that time, it would be Zhang Hai whose family was ruined. Therefore, Zhang Hai would definitely not be polite to these people. Are you done? If you are, go back and wait for the court summons. Get out of here. Seeing these people come out, Zhang Hai's face darkened and he said with a gloomy face. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, whether it was the people from the Administration of Fishery, the people from the Environmental Protection Organization, or the Coastal Patrol, they all got on their boats and fled. They had no choice, they had to escape. Because the next moment, Zhang Hai might even sue them. However, among the crowd of people who ran away like stray dogs, the little girl who just shouted at Zhang Hai didn't show any fear. She still frowned and glared at Zhang Hai. But it was useless to be alone. Soon she was carried on a boat, and then the 3 boats drove away quickly. Seeing the boats leave, Zhang Hai took out his phone and called Moses Adams. He was a man of his words. If he said that he would ruin their family, he would ruin their family. He was so annoying. Boss, what should we do with this guy? Seeing that everyone had left, Edward Anderson, who just came out, removed the hook from the tiger shark's mouth, pointed at the big guy, and asked Zhang Hai. Let it go. Zhang Hai, who didn't intend to catch the tiger shark, waved his hand. Then everyone turned this guy over. If they let it go directly now, this guy would sink to the bottom of the water and die. So Edward Anderson deliberately let the tiger shark rest here for a while. When its eyes began to blink and its body began to become stronger, they put it down. As soon as it entered the water, the tiger shark directly plunged into Zhang Hai's fishing ground. But in less than 5 minutes, it ran out at a faster speed. What a joke! The idiot's patrol team was here. Come on, let's continue. Looking at the tiger shark disappearing under the water, Zhang Hai also smiled. What happened just now was a disaster for those people, but for Zhang Hai, it was just a small accident. After taking a break, they continued to catch the great white shark. While Zhang Hai continued to catch the great white shark, the 3 teams on the other side were also divided. Except for the people of the fishery administration who were now like walking corpses, the people of the coastal patrol team were extremely angry. You guys, what kind of information did you provide? They are catching fish in their own fishing ground. It's none of your business. Are you crazy? How dare you go to other people's fishing ground and tell them what to do? The captain of the coastal patrol team, who was scolded by Zhang Hai to the point that he didn't even dare to fart, also scolded the people of the Environmental Protection Organization. These people had no other choice but to lower their heads and look at him awkwardly. Although the Environmental Protection Organization was very arrogant and organized demonstrations all day long to oppose this and that, when it came to private property, how could they oppose it? After all, not everyone was like Hua Xia's dog fans. Even if it was a dog bought by others, they would still dare to rush over, block cars, and release the dog. These people had nothing better to do. At least these people still had some awareness of the law. They knew that this was not right. So now it was very embarrassing. Don't shout there. If you shout, it only shows that you have a guilty conscience. You clearly saw Zhang Hai catching marine creatures, but you didn't dare to catch him. Do people like you deserve the national emblem of Xueqi? But just when everyone was silent, the little girl appeared again, still standing on the moral high ground, scolding the coastal patrol team in front of her. Oh, little girl. Next time ask your boss to come out and talk. Also, you'd better go back and study the laws of our country. That fishing ground belongs to Mr. Jiang. He can do whatever he wants there, and no one can stop him. You and I are guaranteed. Looking at the girl in front of him, the captain of the coastal patrol team said seriously with a gloomy face. You bastard. You are that guy's accomplice. You will all go to hell after you die. Well, as soon as he talked to her about laws and regulations, this guy wisely changed the topic to other things. These little girls are so unreasonable. Chapter 978. Be careful next time. If you cause me trouble again, I'll lock you up for 48 hours. Don't doubt my ability. Ignoring the girl who started to quarrel, it was obvious that she couldn't win the argument and started to play tricks. The coastal patrol officer pointed at the adults on the other side and said loudly before leaving with his men. The people from the Environmental Protection Association sighed as they watched them leave. Who was the one who provided the information this time? Isn't he setting us up? After the outsiders left, one of the people who were driving the boat complained unhappily. Actually, they wouldn't be able to take it if someone pointed at them and scolded them for a long time, let alone when they couldn't talk back. This time, not only did they cause trouble for themselves, but they also made the people from the Department of Fisheries the scapegoat. Thinking about it made them feel a little guilty. Humans were like that. Under such circumstances, they would start looking for excuses. In any case, the fault wasn't with them. There were too few people in this world who would reflect on themselves. They preferred to push the blame of their wrongdoings onto others. Now, these people were pushing the blame onto the person who provided the information. I didn't expect this guy to be Zhang Hai Sai. The person who got the news also sighed a little awkwardly at this time and whispered in a low voice. Indeed, he also has a source of information. The source of the information was the small town where Zhang Hai and the others lived. Just like old Toby had said yesterday, everyone in the town knew that Zhang Hai and the others were there to catch sharks. Under such circumstances, there were bound to be some people who hated the rich who were unhappy with Zhang Hai. Why would he drive a big yacht and bring his subordinates to catch sharks? What was he pretending for? At the very least, they were very unhappy with Zhang Hai's behavior. Under such circumstances, some people wanted to make Zhang Hai look bad, such as the people from the Environmental Protection Organization. They didn't care if there was a reward for reporting the information, but they were very happy to see Zhang Hai suffer. However, they didn't expect that Zhang Hai would hear some hidden meaning in old Toby's words. He was different from ordinary Americans and Huaxia people in that he liked to deal with everything in the most pessimistic way. Since he knew that someone knew that he was here to catch sharks, he might as well take precautions. If something really happened, it would be troublesome. Although he wasn't here to get shark fins or anything, he still had to be vigilant. Therefore, when the boat arrived there today, Zhang Hai asked Edward Anderson to sail further in. You must pay attention next time. If you have any information, you have to verify the source of the information. Today's incident can't happen again. Seeing that this person also admitted his mistake, the leader of the Environmental Protection Organization here also said seriously, "Yes, it's my mistake this time. I mistakenly believed those fishermen. I knew that those guys were definitely up to no good." When the person heard the leader's words, he took advantage of the situation and said seriously. Hearing his words, everyone stopped talking. After all, the Environmental Protection Association was not an organization established by the country. They were only together to protect wild animals. Therefore, there wasn't much of a conflict of interest. They also didn't want to offend too many people because of this mistake. We can't just let this go. However, there were some people who didn't think so, such as the girl. Hearing that everyone was going to let this matter slide and no longer look for trouble with Zhang Hai, the girl was not going to do it. Orna, what else do you want? Kevin has already admitted his mistake. Listening to the unforgiving girl, the leader frowned and then said with some dissatisfaction. Although this is not an official organization, he also has to be dignified. I'm not talking about Kevin. I'm talking about Zhang Hai. We can't just let this go. We just saw that he caught a tiger shark. It's very likely that after we leave, He will take the tiger shark's fin and then throw its body into the cold sea. Even if we don't have evidence, we all know that 8 killer whales died in his hands. This matter can't just be let go. The girl waved her hand. Originally, she didn't want to find Kevin, the member who called everyone over after getting the information. She was eyeing Zhang Hai. She can't let Zhang Hai escape like this. Yes, in her eyes, Zhang Hai had already broken the law. It was only because he was rich that he escaped the punishment of the law. Now that she was here, she must represent justice, represent the moon, and eliminate Zhang Hai, this malignant tumor. Oh my God, Orna. You know he's a rich man. He's not destined to be punished by the law. Plus, that's his fish farm. He can do whatever he wants. The leader slapped his forehead and said helplessly. To him, this Orna was indeed a troublesome person. Although Orna looked very young and beautiful, she was actually 24 years old this year. She was born with a child's face and a huge face. Cough, it was just a child's face. There was nothing huge on her face. Time rarely left any traces on her face. This was not a disease. It was just that she was relatively young. Plus, she liked to dress up like a young person. She often carried a backpack. From the back, she might look like a high school student, but from the front, she looked like a junior high school student. But don't underestimate this girl. Although she was young, her IQ was quite high. At the age of 24, she already had a doctorate in life sciences from Princeton University. At the same time, she also had a master's degree in economics. According to her, the master's degree in economics was only because she needed to earn money to support herself. As for life sciences, she specialized in animals. This was her favorite field. Maybe it was because she had been in school for too many years that she became stupid. So, at the age of 24, she did not lack money. Secondly, she had a reputation. However, no matter what she did, she took things for granted. If people in China were called dog fans or sheep fans, then she was an animal fan. She resisted any action that killed animals. For this reason, she even became a vegetarian. In the beginning, she even went around persuading her friends to be vegetarian. Her parents also wanted to be vegetarian. She even went to the slaughterhouse to demonstrate. Unfortunately, she was chased away, and her friends became fewer and fewer. Later, she also understood that she could not stop others from eating meat because humans were also part of the environment. If humans really did not eat meat, then the food chain would collapse. So later on, she did not stop others from eating beef, fish, or anything like that. However, she still loved wild animals. 3 years ago, she joined the Environmental Protection Association. Because she was rich and was a fanatic, she was very popular in the association. A few days ago, after learning that 8 killer whales had died in Zhang Hai's waters, she took it for granted that they were killed by Zhang Hai. Now that she heard that Zhang Hai was killing sharks, she took the initiative to ask for permission to participate in this operation. In the end, she came this time, only to see the darkness of the world. In her eyes, Zhang Hai had no intention of repenting at all. Instead, he shamelessly took pride in it. Moreover, he used his identity as a rich person to suppress the people from the Administration of Fisheries and the Coastal Patrol. This really pissed off the young lady. She felt that if Zhang Hai was in front of her, she would eat him up. I'm going to find evidence of his crimes. This is not over. On the boat, Orna said with a righteous face. And the people who were with her helplessly covered their faces. Well, they couldn't control this young lady anymore. Okay, you go find evidence of his crimes. But before that, we have to go back first. This time, the matter is not small. It seems that the president will have to step in. Patting his cheeks, the leader said somewhat speechlessly. He was really tired. No matter how these people from the Environmental Protection Organization went back, Zhang Hai and the others had a good harvest in the afternoon. They caught 3 more great white sharks. In addition to the 3 from yesterday and the one they just released, Zhang Hai's great white shark navy already had 7. Although there was a big difference in size and age, Zhang Hai believed that with his aura training, these guys would inevitably grow very big in the future. Big Fool's size had basically reached its limit. It was about 12 or 13 meters. It couldn't grow any bigger. However, the sand tiger shark could only grow up to 3, 4 meters, and the great white sharks could grow up to more than 6 meters, or even 7 or 8 meters. Zhang Hai was still looking forward to seeing how big they could grow with aura. Maybe after a while, Zhang Hai could raise more than a dozen megalodon sharks. At that time, not to mention killer whales, sperm whales, and humpback whales, even blue whales, Zhang Hai could command his navy to kill them. After catching 4 sharks today, Zhang Hai and the others returned to the town. It was only about 4 o'clock in the afternoon when they left, but it was almost 9 o'clock when they returned to the town. Zhang Hai took Edward Anderson back to Toby and George's small hotel and had a good meal. After sending some food to Bell Lester and Harriman Fells, they went to sleep. The night was quiet. The next morning, Zhang Hai paid for the room. Why? Because if there were no accidents, Zhang Hai and the others would go back today. They had already caught 7 sharks. Zhang Hai's goal was 10, but it didn't matter if there were less than 10. It was fine to have 8 or 9. Zhang Hai didn't believe that he couldn't catch one today, so he checked out in advance. They didn't have to come to this gloomy town tonight, but could go home. After checking out and eating breakfast, Zhang Hai and the others set off again. Chapter 979. Oh, our luck is really good today. It seems that we might be able to go home before the sun rises. Seeing that Zhang Hai had caught the second great white shark in less than an hour, Bell Lester said with a smile. Hearing his words, although the others didn't say anything, the smile on their faces said it all. After today's work, everyone will have 3 days off. The reward is 10,000 yuan. Seeing that everyone was in high spirits, Zhang Hai also said. Seeing that Zhang Hai was so generous, his subordinates became even more excited. Amidst the laughter, the 4.5-meter-long great white shark was finally exhausted and was pulled to the side of the boat. Zhang Hai and the others also turned this guy over. After injecting spiritual energy into it, they removed the hook from its mouth and put it back into the water. After a while, when the spiritual energy began to take effect and the fish almost recovered, they put it back into the sea. This is the 9th one. Let's take a break and catch another one. After clapping his hands, Zhang Hai said with a smile. Seeing that it was only 2 o'clock, everyone laughed happily. In fact, Zhang Hai could have just let it go, but since there was still time, it was not a problem to wait a little longer. After resting for about 15 minutes, Edward Anderson rehung the internal organs of the cow and threw them into the sea. In an instant, a large number of fish gathered again. Compared to the number of fish outside of Zhang Hai's fishing ground, there were more fish in Zhang Hai's manor. After Zhang Hai decided to develop his new fishing ground, he began to spread the grass seeds. Of course, it was impossible to spread the grass seeds by boat. Now they had a plane. However, when he was preparing to develop the ocean, he used a boat to spread the grass seeds. It was quite slow, taking a month to spread the grass seeds. But now that he had the helicopter and the AT-802F, it was much faster to scatter the seeds. He could just sit on the plane and throw the seeds down when it was flying at a low altitude. Then, he could sit on the helicopter and fill in the gaps that he had not scattered. First, he soaked the seeds of the seaweed in seaweed, which was to let them germinate. Of course, while soaking, Zhang Hai had already injected spiritual energy into them. After the seeds sprouted, he directly took the helicopter and threw the grass seeds directly into the sea. These grass seeds contained spiritual energy. After entering the sea, they would take root in the sand, and the survival rate was quite high. Generally speaking, it was good to have a survival rate of more than 60%. After all, it was grass. If it were other things, the survival rate would be less than 20%. However, Zhang Hai's grass seeds had a survival rate of more than 80%. The reason why they didn't survive was because they were eaten by fish. Zhang Hai couldn't do anything about it. Therefore, although it had only been more than a month, the seaweed and seaweed rooted in the sea had begun to play their role. First of all, Zhang Hai's sea water was getting colder and colder, but there were more and more fish. After Zhang Hai and Iron Bull discussed the fish to be raised this year, he had already started to put in the octopus and mullet a few days ago. These little guys would live here for a month, and then they would become food for other fish. Zhang Hai and the others couldn't do anything about these small fish eating the cow's internal organs. They could only continue to wait. If they finished eating, they would put in another piece. After fishing, there would definitely be some bait to feed the fish. However, while they were waiting there, suddenly a black shadow slowly floated up from under the water. There's something. Edward Anderson, who had been paying attention, saw the black shadow and said immediately. He then hid his head in the range of the boat, and at the same time, gestured to the others to keep quiet. It should be. However, after glancing at it, Zhang Hai said with some doubts. His eyesight was much better than Edward Anderson's. These days, he had seen a lot of sharks, such as mackerel sharks, tiger sharks, great blue sharks, and so on. However, the size of these sharks was not the same as the black shadow in front of him. Although this black shadow was also very big, about the same size as an ordinary great white shark, it was much sturdier. Looking at this fish, Zhang Hai scratched his head. His sixth sense told him that this should be a shark, but the color of the fish's back was somewhat similar to that of a shark. This made him a little confused. Just as he was thinking about it, Edward Anderson's expression changed. This is indeed not a shark, it's a black tuna. When he said the last three words, Edward Anderson's eyes almost lit up. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai was also stunned for a moment. Black tuna? He was definitely not unfamiliar with this kind of fish. If the black tuna didn't understand, then everyone should know about the bluefin golden lance. There were a lot of bluefin golden lance in Zhang Hai's fish farm. Some were chased here by Big Fool, and some came here by themselves because they felt that the spiritual energy here was abundant. Therefore, there was a school of bluefin golden lance in Zhang Hai's fish farm. Zhang Hai didn't carefully count how many there were, but at least there were more than 100 of them, and this was only referring to the bluefin, yellowfin, masu, and so on. Zhang Hai's fish farm was too big, so he had tens of thousands of bluefin golden lance without raising them. Last year, when the weather was still hot, he often went into the water to catch lobsters, abalones, prawns, and so on. He watched the schools of bluefin golden lance eating herring or squid. The ecological balance in Zhang Hai's manor was quite unbalanced. It was completely dependent on his spiritual energy to surround these fish. If one day, Zhang Hai's spiritual energy ran out, then his fish farm would be worthless. At that time, he saw a lot of bluefin golden lance in the fish farm. He thought that after a few more years, the number of these little things would be even more. It was precisely because of this that during the fishing exhibition last year, Zhang Hai got 2 bluefin golden lance as decorations and were bought by the islanders. He didn't want to keep them as breeding fish because he didn't lack these things now. Now that he saw a bluefin golden lance, Zhang Hai didn't say anything. If it really took the bait, then he would eat it or sell it, but he couldn't let others know. After all, it was now the fishing season for bluefin golden lance. The bluefin golden lance in the water seemed to have lived for a long time. Although the cow's innards with spiritual energy were very attractive to it, it was still in a state of observation, watching the small fish constantly pecking at the cow's innards in front of it. Seeing that the cow's innards were getting smaller and smaller, but nothing happened, the fish couldn't stay still. Finally, the temptation of the cow's innards exceeded its many years of experience. It opened its big mouth and swallowed the remaining half of the cow's innards in an instant. But as soon as it swallowed it, it knew that it was bad. Because the corner of its mouth hurt, its mouth had been pierced. At this time, Edward Anderson also exerted force and retracted the line. Under the pain, the bluefin golden lance, which was originally going to drill under the sea, swam in a straight line toward the distance. However, Edward Anderson and the others were not to be trifled with. They let it swim, but they controlled the direction it swam in. It couldn't let go of the line if it swam straight, so it could only swim in circles. Under its struggle, its physical strength was quickly drained, and Edward Anderson also looked at it with a smile while constantly controlling the line in his hand. Finally, the fish couldn't take it anymore. After struggling for about half an hour, it helplessly listened to Edward Anderson's instructions and was pulled to the side of the boat. When it was pulled over, the people on the boat snorted. This guy was really a huge monster. The whole fish looked no smaller than a great white shark. The whole body didn't look carefully, but it was almost 5 meters long. The dark blue back made Zhang Hai and the others' faces almost cramp with laughter. Get it up quickly. Seeing that the big guy was no longer swimming, Edward Anderson also said loudly. Tunas were the same as some sharks. They needed to keep swimming to breathe. If they didn't move, they wouldn't breathe, and they would suffocate. The blood of the dead tunas would flow into their meat, so the fish wouldn't taste good. Edward Anderson was an expert. Although the others didn't know much about this, It wasn't a problem for them to follow orders. Harriman Fells immediately picked up the hook and hooked it onto the fish's body. Then he lifted it up. As mentioned before, Harriman Fells was born with great strength, but even so, he couldn't lift it. Seeing that his friend couldn't stand it anymore, Knursen Peters reached out to help, but the two of them couldn't lift the fish up. Seeing this, Zhang Hai had to step in. He walked directly to the hook and lifted it with his right hand. He was also a little surprised. The fish was really heavy, but it was far from the weight that Zhang Hai couldn't bear. Using his right arm, Zhang Hai directly lifted the fish up and threw it on the boat. Edward Anderson immediately pulled up the fish's tail with a lasso, then hung the whole fish upside down. After that, he killed the fish and let out the blood. After everything was done, Edward Anderson began to measure. But when the measurement was over, he couldn't help but take a deep breath because this guy was really terrifying. What's the data? Seeing that Edward Anderson was a little stunned, Zhang Hai also came over and asked. When Edward Anderson showed the data to Zhang Hai was also a little stunned and looked at him in disbelief. Boss, what should we do? Looking at Zhang Hai, Edward Anderson asked Zhang Hai with some hesitation. Do you still need to ask? Sell it. But Zhang Hai slapped his thigh. If we don't sell it, what's the point of keeping it? Chapter 980. That night, under the cover of the night, Zhang Hai took this huge tuna and drove to the dock of his fishery. Zhang Hai was sitting in the cabin, looking at the data in his hand with the help of the light. 87 meters long, 692 kilograms, a new world record. Looking at the data in his hand, Zhang Hai's eyes became brighter and brighter. After catching the tuna in the afternoon, Edward Anderson measured it and then loaded it into Zhang Hai's cabin. They re-caught a great white shark before returning. Now Zhang Hai has 2 navies. One is Big Fool leading his wife, plus 13 adult dolphins, and the other is these 10 great white sharks. Zhang Hai named them White 1 to White 10 according to the order of catching them. Now these guys have also gathered and began to patrol the fishery. Zhang Hai believes that as long as there is time, the growth rate of these 10 great white sharks will be amazing. As long as they grow up to 8 or 9 meters in length, Zhang Hai will not be afraid of anything in the future. The killer whale from last time? If they dare to come again, Zhang Hai dares to not let any of them run away. 10 great white sharks is a fixed task and now it is successfully completed, and the bluefin tuna is an out-and-out gift. But now this gift, Zhang Hai has to study how to sell it. With such a big tuna, Zhang Hai can't eat it, so he can only sell it, but there is a problem. Bluefin tuna is now banned in North America. He can't sell it openly, but he can sell it to the black market. First, he doesn't want to be involved with the dark world. Second, he can't sell it at a high price, so he still has some hesitation. But when he came back, he already thought about it. Since he can't sell it at a high price, he can use Perwalton to sell it. Of course, he and Perwalton are not using these 2 unpleasant words, but she can really help him. Zhang Hai made up his mind. He was going to wait for his fish to go into the freezer and call Perwalton. After a few hours of turbulence, Zhang Hai's boat arrived at his dock at about 9 o'clock in the evening. After arriving at the dock, there was no welcoming ceremony or many people. There were only 2 people here, one was Robbins Garcia, and the other was Philemon Turner. There were not even fishermen. This also showed the extent of Zhang Hai's trust. After the 2 helped Zhang Hai carry the fish off the boat, they covered it with a layer of black cloth and put it on the F-750. Then they drove Zhang Hai and the others back to Zhang Hai's mansion. At this time, no one was sleeping in Zhang Hai's mansion. When they saw Zhang Hai and the others carrying the big fish, they were stunned. This is a big guy. After putting it in the freezer, which specializes in freezing high-quality seafood, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. On the spot, Zhang Hai gave Edward Anderson and the others a bonus. As he said, each of them would get $10,000. But because they caught the big guy, the original $10,000 was tripled. Zhang Hai gave each of them a bonus of $40,000. As for Robbins Garcia and Philemon Turner, they were given $5,000 each. After all, they only drove the car. This was also considered as hush money. These people naturally had nothing to say about the money Zhang Hai gave them. Naturally, They would accept the money given to them by Zhang Hai. After receiving the money, these people went back to sleep. Zhang Hai took out his phone and called Perwalton. "Hey, Humph, be gentle, you little such. Put your tongue in." The phone rang a few times before Perwalton picked it up. However, as soon as he picked up, the voice on the other side made Zhang Hai feel a little embarrassed. Needless to say, she should be doing something shameful with her girls. "Hey, I'm not bothering you, am I?" Listening to the voice on the phone, Zhang Hai asked awkwardly. "Of course I'm bothering you, but it's you." "It doesn't matter. Tell me, why are you calling me? Do you miss me?" "Hee, let me tell you, I recently found a few young models from Southeast Asia. That feeling, tisk. I'm saving the first time for you. If you have time, you can come and experience it." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Perwalton was not shy at all. "Instead," she said boldly. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai was sweating. "This topic is really not easy to answer. I definitely miss you, but I just came back a few days ago. Naturally, I have to spend some time with my girlfriends. But if you have time, can you come to me tomorrow?" Listening to the voice of Perwalton over there, Zhang Hai said a little embarrassedly. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Perwalton also smiled. "Okay, no problem. But can you tell me in advance, why are you looking for me? I can be prepared." Hearing that Zhang Hai was looking for her, Perwalton also asked with a smile. "I caught a fish, a very big tuna." It's not good to say it on the phone, so Zhang Hai said it vaguely, but Perwalton understood when she heard it, and then responded on the other side of the phone. "Who? I'm just waiting for her to come tomorrow. Just a phone call made me feel a little excited." Hanging up the phone, Zhang Hai imagined the scene at Perwalton's place and couldn't help but shake his head. This woman is not easy to deal with. "Go to sleep. I haven't tasted meat for several days." Indeed, Zhang Hai had been staying in the hotel for the past few days and didn't do anything else. Now that he was back, he naturally had to do something. Putting away the phone, Zhang Hai returned to the hall, but after coming back, he found that only Delina, Marian, and Taraga were here, and the others were not there. Needless to say, they are preparing a surprise for him. Since the end of the bathroom that day, they have prepared a lot of surprises for Zhang Hai, and Zhang Hai also found that he seems to have changed a little. He actually likes this thing very much. Now when he heard that they are preparing again, Zhang Hai also walked into his room eagerly. As soon as he pushed the door and walked in, he was instantly greeted by a scene of beautiful women in front of Zhang Hai. Why use this word? It is mainly because the atmosphere in the room really has a feeling of spring. At this time, in the room, Zhang Hai's girls were changing their clothes. Of course, some have already finished changing, such as Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi. After all, they have worn it before, so they changed very quickly. Some people are changing, such as Qijie, Chia, Aphrodite, and others, and some people have not changed yet. At this time, they are standing there naked, thinking about how to wear the clothes. Today, the theme prepared by Feng Yunchen and the others should be Huaxia elements, because at this time, they are all wearing cheongsams, but not the kind of cheongsams with high slit, but the kind of cheongsams that are very short. The bottom of the cheongsams is even just above the thighs. When they move, the front and back curtains will move back and forth, and the scenery below is clearly visible. And because the cheongsams themselves are not made according to their figures, so there are big and small cheongsams, and they look more strange and beautiful. "Ah, what are you doing? We are not done changing yet." Seeing Zhang Hai walk in like this, Qijie immediately pulled down the clothes that were half put on, and then said to Zhang Hai with a look of displeasure. But hearing her words, Zhang Hai took the initiative to move closer. "We are already an old couple. What is there to be embarrassed about? Come, let me take a good look." Zhang Hai came to Qijie's side, hugged her in his arms, and said with a smile. Hearing Zhang Hai's words and Zhang Hai's breath, Qijie was a little overwhelmed in an instant, but now she can't push him away, nor can she not push him away. After all, they are dressed like this to seduce Zhang Hai. Now that Zhang Hai has fallen into the trap, she naturally has to half push and half accept. Just as she was struggling there, Zhang Hai had already picked her up. Sometimes, the communication between a man and a woman doesn't need too many words. Just like Zhang Hai, it is better to directly express with actions. Isn't it better? She patted Zhang Hai's chest coquettishly, and she let Zhang Hai do whatever he wants. This night is naturally a spring breeze. Although Zhonghai can't achieve balance, it is not a problem to share the rain and dew. Everyone was busy from 9 o'clock in the evening to the next day. At dawn, they officially fell asleep and slept until noon. If it weren't for Perwalton's arrival, Zhonghai and the others might still be asleep. After a simple wash, Chia began to command everyone to cook, and Zhonghai yawned and looked at Perwalton, who was sitting on the sofa with a smile. I am a little envious of you. Qu'est-ce? Look at these girls on your side. When I first saw them, although they were beautiful, they were not as beautiful as they are now. Look, it is really good for a woman's beauty to be watered by you every day. Looking at Zhonghai, Perwalton said with a smile. Hearing her words, Zhonghai shrugged. No one will say anything if you want to live here. Looking at Perwalton, Zhonghai said calmly. That's right. No one will say anything if I move in, but if I bring a dozen girls with me, they will probably cut me into pieces. You little heartless girl. If you have time, remember to visit me more often. By the way, what's your purpose for calling me here? Smiling and patting Zhonghai, Perwalton said with a smile, but soon turned to the main topic. Come here. Zhonghai also asked her to come here for a purpose. Without saying anything, he led her to the cold storage. Chapter 981. After the two joked for a while, Zhonghai took Perwalton to the direction of the cold storage. Zhonghai's house was very big, really big, including the cold storage below. The cold storage was divided into 5 rooms, each with different functions. The temperature was 5 degrees above zero, -7 degrees below zero, -15 degrees below zero, -30 degrees below zero, -30 degrees below zero, plus nitrogen. These 5 rooms had different temperatures, so they handled different things. For example, the 5 degrees below zero were for vegetables and fruits that were in season. Zhonghai's manor had a vegetable greenhouse with many fruit trees, such as blueberries, cherries, and big cherries in the United States. These things were now also available in China, but the price was slightly higher. In the United States, these things were not very expensive. There was also cranberry, a small round fruit with bright red skin that grew on low vines. This thing was more of a dried fruit in China, but there were many in the north of the United States. It mainly grew in the swamps and wetlands of North America. It was said that the total planted area in the world was less than 40,000 acres. No one knew whether this was the case or not. In addition, there was also snake fruit, which was a kind of red and special apple. Of course, there were also grapes, but this thing was a matter of season. After these vegetables and fruits were ripe or not eaten, Zhonghai would put them in the 5 degrees below zero warehouse, which could be stored for a few days. The 0 degrees below zero was the freezer. For example, some lobsters, abalones and so on. This warehouse was basically a warehouse for precious seafood. There were many water tanks in this warehouse. Because the temperature was kept at 0 degrees, the water would not freeze, but it could also keep these seafood in a fresh state to the maximum extent. The -7 degrees below zero was for beef. Good beef needed to be eaten to get rid of the sourness. The -7 degrees below zero was just right, so it was specially for beef. The -15 degrees below zero was the freezer, just like the refrigerator at home. Any frozen chicken, frozen meat, and so on were all stored here. The -30 degrees below zero was the nitrogen freezer. Nitrogen was known to be able to cool down quickly. When it turned into a liquid, the temperature was nearly -200 degrees. Zhonghai's place was naturally not -200 degrees. Basically, the role of nitrogen was to cool things down quickly. For example, some top-notch beef and seafood could only be frozen for about a week to 10 days, which meant that they had to be sold within a week to 10 days. If they couldn't be sold, the frozen meat would go bad. Of course, some people said that the frozen meat was actually frozen and melted, which was called frozen meat. This was a very common thing in China. In some supermarkets, if you saw some frozen beef, 90% of it had just melted, then it was called frozen. But in fact, this was a lie. The real chilled meat was really just killed and then wrapped in a layer of crisp ice to maintain the freshness of the meat itself. This was called chilled meat, and this room was specially used to preserve the high-grade products that couldn't be chilled. Freshly slaughtered beef or freshly caught fish, which probably could not be sold within 10 days, were directly sent here. With a spray of phlegm, the beef and fish would solidify instantly. It would take almost a few seconds for them to solidify. This way, the texture of the fish and beef would be preserved to the maximum extent. After they melted, although there was no way to sell them as frozen, they were still more valuable than frozen ones. When these 5 warehouses were built, Edward Anderson and Robbins Garcia presided over it. They thought so at the beginning, but basically, only the first 4 warehouses could be used now. Zhang Hai's beef and seafood were supplied all over the United States and even Europe. Of course, the royal family of Dubai was also included. His beef was only in short supply, but there was no time when it could not be sold out. Zhang Hai brought Prawalton to the freezer where the frozen food was stored. As the door of the freezer opened, the lights also lit up. Then, in front of Prawalton's eyes, a huge tuna appeared in front of her. Oh my God, this is a tuna? And it's a bluefin one. Oh my God, how big is this? Looking at the fish in front of her, Prawalton was a little incoherent. She looked at Zhang Hai in surprise and asked. Body length, 487. Weight, 692. Looking at Prawalton's appearance, Zhang Hai also smiled. He knew that this number was indeed amazing. A new global record. But he knew that this fish was just an ordinary bluefin in his manner. He remembered that he should have seen a bigger one when he was diving. Oh my God, this is really a big guy. Touching the fish's body, Prawalton also muttered in shock. She often dealt with these big guys, but to be honest, it was her first time seeing such a big one. What are you going to do? Patting the big fish's head, Prawalton looked at Zhang Hai. I have to ask you about this. It was caught yesterday. Today is the 2nd day. Can Walmart buy it? Otherwise, what else can we do? Shrugging his shoulders, Zhang Hai really didn't know much about this. It was better to ask Prawalton. Walmart will definitely buy it, but to be honest, it's a waste to sell it to us. This fish can't be sold by the weight. It can only be sold as a whole. In the United States, this fish is probably only worth about $400,000. Shaking her head, Prawalton said directly. Hearing her offer, Zhang Hai also curled his lips. Although $400,000 for a fish is not a small amount, it is definitely not a lot. But if it goes to Japan, this fish can at least be sold for this amount. Prawalton said while making a 2 gesture. Seeing her gesture, Zhang Hai also raised his eyebrows. $2 million? That's not bad. Then what are we waiting for? We should send this thing to where it should go. In fact, in Zhang Hai's view, tuna is the same thing. To be honest, the taste is really the same. He is quite happy to use it to cheat money from Japan. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Prawalton also smiled. I remember that you and I had discussed whether we could directly get a line to sell fish in Japan. I had already set up the line at that time. Now that we have this fish, I believe that our first shot will be very successful. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Prawalton also smiled and said, then showed Zhang Hai her mobile phone. There is a list of plans in her mobile phone. When Zhang Hai participated in the fishery exhibition last year, a Japanese businessman bought 2 of Zhang Hai's fish, and the price was not low. At that time, Zhang Hai asked Prawalton because in his impression, this fish was really not worth so much money. But later, he learned that the price of this fish in the United States and Japan was different. After learning this news, Zhang Hai wanted to sell the fish directly to Japan, so he discussed it with Prawalton. Prawalton also said that she would try it. Unexpectedly, it was now useful. Prawalton, to be exact, the Walmart Group, had already set up a line in Japan, but unfortunately, they lost a lot of money before. Walmart actually entered the Japanese market in 2002. After all, the Japanese market was the 2nd largest retail market in the world at that time. But after entering, they lost money for years, so they announced their withdrawal in 2005. Of course, the main reason was the withdrawal of their main business. It was impossible to withdraw all the money they invested there. At present, Walmart has more than 370 supermarkets in Japan. There are still supermarkets, but they are not as enthusiastic as before. Basically, they don't want you to make money, but you also don't want to lose money. At least, the brand of Walmart must remain in the hearts of the Japanese people. Last year, Prawalton took the initiative to ask about Walmart in Japan. Naturally, the senior management of Walmart also knew about it. Walmart's recent strategy was mainly to focus on Shanghai's beef and seafood. The expansion was quite good. Originally, only the northeast corner of the United States and some large cities sold Shanghai's beef. But now, some towns in the northeast corner of the United States are selling Walmart's beef. There are more big cities, including some big cities in the south. It can be said that Shanghai's beef had almost unified the high-end beef market in the US. Luckily, his beef was not the right product. At the same time, Walmart also made use of Shanghai's beef to attack other markets in Europe. Currently, Walmart supermarkets in the UK, France, Italy, and other countries also sell Shanghai's beef. The purchase rate is really good. Basically, after Walmart's beef is sold out in less than 2 days. The only country that is not interested in Shanghai's beef is Germany. This is because Germans like to eat pork. But in Asia, beef cannot enter the market. For example, beef cannot enter Japan. It is mainly because of the national pride of that country. They do not allow anyone to say that Shanghai's beef is better than theirs. Japanese beef is the best in the world. Shanghai's beef? They are not interested. Alright, the South Koreans were the same. In their eyes, Hanyo was the best. There was no one else who could compare to him. As for why they cannot enter Huaxia, it is because Shanghai and Chile sell their steaks in Huaxia. Secondly, Huaxia has high import tariffs on US beef. Huaxia is an independent country, and they will not allow US products to be dumped there. Although Shanghai is a citizen of Huaxia and still has his Chinese citizenship, his beef is from the US. That's why Walmart supermarkets do not sell Shanghai's beef in Huaxia. If Feng Yu wants to eat his beef, he can only go to Chile's 4 steakhouses. Having said that, America's low-grade and mid-grade beef could be imported into Japan. High-grade beef, like Shanghai's beef, was not allowed to be sold. But there might be a loophole for fish. Chapter 982. Jiang, in order to cooperate with your fish, we are going to hold an auction in the Tsukiji market. Your fish is the biggest advertisement. If you have time, you can go and have a look. After all, you also have to know how popular your fish is. As for your safety, you don't have to worry about it. I will also go, you can live with me. Looking at Zhang Hai, Prawalton said with a smile. To be honest, when she saw Zhang Hai, she also had some impulses in that aspect. It's just that in the face of business, that impulse has long been suppressed by her. In her opinion, if this fish is successfully caught, then she will be very excited. If at that time, Zhang Hai will accompany her. TSK. This I have to study it. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Prawalton pouted slightly. Then you have to think about it carefully. You know, we still need a few days to operate your fish, and we have to send it to the island without anyone knowing. This is not an easy task. Looking at Zhang Hai, Prawalton said. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai also took her out of the warehouse. In the afternoon, they naturally had a good meal at Zhang Hai's place. Prawalton didn't use it in the evening, but she called her men and was ready to take over the fish at any time. In the evening, after Zhang Hai and the others exercised, they hugged Qi Jie and thought about what Prawalton said. What's wrong? Still not sleeping, aren't you tired? Qi Jie, who was lying in the crook of Zhang Hai's arm like a kitten, asked softly. She was the first one to do that, and now she had already woken up from her nap. Well, you sleep first. Looking at Qi Jie, Zhang Hai smiled at her, then gently patted her pink back and said to her. But after hearing Zhang Hai's words, Qi Jie didn't sleep. She propped up her body and looked at Zhang Hai. Say it, what do you want? You're a person who wears everything on your face. You don't have any shrewdness at all. But that's what I like about you. Looking at Zhang Hai, Qi Jie said with a smile. Oh, it's like this. Hearing Qi Jie's words, Zhang Hai sighed, and then told Qi Jie what he said to Prawalton today. Of course, he didn't say that Prawalton asked him to live with her. He just said that Prawalton wanted him to see it with his own eyes and examine the Japanese market, which is good for his future fishing business. Zhang Hai has a lot of fishing business in the United States and Europe, but fish is different from beef. Beef has a very clear grade. What kind of beef is sold at what price? This is fixed. But fish has no fixed price, only a fixed low price. Zhang Hai's fish is really good. Now the price is high, and people are rushing to buy it. But what will happen after a long time? What if Zhang Hai's supply is big? If they can't sell it in North America, they can send it to Europe. What if the Europeans don't recognize it? The domestic line is destined not to be too wide, because the domestic tax on Zhang Hai's fishing industry will be heavy. Take Zhang Hai's fish for example. If he sold it at retail for $50 a kilo, which is 150 renminbi a kilo, the customs there would charge him 40%. Do you believe it? Therefore, when Zhang Hai sold fish, the quantity was very small. He takes the high-end route. The low-end Zhang Hai's money is not enough to pay the tax. If the tax is added to the fish, he will sell white pomfret for nearly 240 renminbi per kilogram. But Zhang Hai wants to ask, is there anyone in China who buys white pomfret for 240 renminbi per kilogram? Zhang Hai was also a very patriotic person in He Kingdom. Otherwise, he wouldn't have kept his current nationality. Moreover, he helped He Kingdom to connect with Du Feimin. But he couldn't possibly lose money. People are selfish. Zhang Hai doesn't know if he will take the money to support society when he is old, but at least not now. This is also the reason why it is difficult to see those high-end seafood in the restaurants of ordinary people. But the Japanese like to eat fish, and the fish they consume every year is far more than the people in their country. What's more, it is still very popular with tourists, such as sushi houses, which are really popular. Under such circumstances, only the Japanese can sell at a high price. Well, you go. After thinking for a while, Qi Jie said to Zhang Hai, why didn't you stop me this time? Looking at Qi Jie, Zhang Hai looked at her with some doubts. It shouldn't be. Stopping you depends on the matter. You forgot that I always hope that you can be busy with your career. For example, the livestock exhibition industry in San Antonio is not that important. It's okay if you don't go, or let Robbins Garcia go, but now it's an expansion of overseas business. More or less you have to go personally. Otherwise, how can you rest assured? Anyway, I'm worried about Prawalton. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Qi Jie rolled her eyes at him, and then said with some bitterness, then let's go together. I just haven't been to Japan. Have you guys not been there? Hearing Qi Jie's words, Zhang Hai smiled a little awkwardly, and then nodded. Since she said she wanted to go, then everyone should go together. We don't want to go. We won't go. We know that those Japanese are quite unfriendly to you. After all, you've slapped their faces on the beef. If we go there, we'll probably bring you some trouble. If they kidnap us, we'll be in trouble. I don't trust Pra Walton's bodyguard. You'd better go with Azalina. If anything happens, it'll be easy for you to escape. Hearing Zhang Hai's proposal, to be honest, Qi Jie was indeed a little tempted, but soon she shook her head. A gentleman does not stand under a collapsing wall. If it wasn't because Zhang Hai really wanted to see the market there with his own eyes, she estimated that Zhang Hai would not go. Just as she thought, Zhang Hai is a homebody. He really has no interest in Japan. What? He can go and see those teachers who taught him and experience the customs of Japan? Zhang Hai now has more than 20 girls around him, and all of them are quite obedient. They will do whatever he wants them to do. They will pose whatever he wants them to pose. Under such circumstances, is there a need to experience the customs of Japan? Zhang Hai is crazy. He is really not the hungry man now. He is now a full man. A full man? Well, he is indeed a little full. Therefore Japan for him is really not that tempting. Okay, I will go early and come back early. Anyway, the auction will not take long. Hearing Qi Jie's words, Zhang Hai also nodded and said to her seriously. When Qi Jie heard Zhang Hai's words, she also hugged Zhang Hai and fell asleep. Zhang Hai took out his mobile phone and sent a message to Prawalton. He needs to let her handle this matter first. The next morning, when Zhang Hai woke up, Prawalton was already prepared. The procedures, the plane, the airport, the time of departure, everything has been arranged. They are just waiting for Zhang Hai to wake up and then go to get the fish. The next thing is very simple. It is not the first time Zhang Hai went out, so he is naturally familiar with it. Soon, Zhang Hai's people were set. Zhang Hai, Azalina, and Wallace Shelley, 3 people. The reason why it is so simple is that they are going to Japan. If the people of this country want to deal with Zhonghai, it is useless to have more people. At that time, it will be troublesome. And these 3 people, it is very easy for any one of them to escape, especially Zhonghai. It is very easy for him. He also believes in Azalina and Wallace Shelley's skills. The second reason is because they are only going for a few days. According to Perwalton, including today, they will only stay in Japan for a total of 4 days. The 4th night is the time of the auction. On the 4th night or the 5th day, they can come back. It is just that they are going for a few days, and Perwalton will definitely have a lot of bodyguards. After everything was booked, Zhonghai and the others set off. They drove an F-750, which was responsible for transporting the fish. After the fish arrived at the airport, they handed it over to P.R.A. Walton's people. Although the fish were chilled, P.R.A. Walton's people used frozen bluefin tuna strips. This way, Zhonghai's fishing time was vague. This was their way of doing things, and Zhonghai couldn't learn it. After the fish got on the plane, Zhonghai and the others also got on Perwalton's private jet. Well, to be exact, it should be the Walmart Group's private jet for Perwalton. This jet belongs to the family, but if Perwalton is still in power, the family will let her use it for free. This is also one of the high-level benefits. After getting on the plane, Zhonghai can't help but exclaim. Chapter 983. However, although the color would make people complain, he had to admit that Perwalton's plane decoration was really like a bug. The plane was divided into 2 floors. The lower floor was the cargo hold, where Zhonghai's fish was, and the upper floor was divided into 4 parts: rooms, lounge, hall, and entertainment room. Zhonghai didn't go to other places, because the hall was just inside. As soon as he walked into the hall, Zhonghai couldn't help but give a middle finger in his heart. This hall was really quite unique. The sofas in the hall were fixed on the 2 sides and the back of the cabin. There was only 1 row. Of course, the sofas were the best sofas. You can lie down and turn around. Everything was electric. If you want to watch the clouds, you can watch the clouds. If you want to watch the front, you can do anything you want, except for doing a handstand. In the middle of the hall, there was a projection TV. It was the kind that projected from the bottom to the top. It was an enlarged version of the 3D TV in Zhonghai's house. As for the sides of the TV, there were 8 steel pipes. When Zhonghai saw this thing, he looked at Perwalton. Perwalton smiled and winked. For her, when flying in the air, she naturally wanted to find some fun. After boarding the plane, before the plane took off, she took Zhonghai and the others to have a look. It had to be admitted that Zhonghai's plane could be considered as a commercial plane. After all, there were many people. And this plane was Perwalton's other house. The rooms behind the hall were not small, and each of them had a separate bathroom. In the lounge, there was a small swimming pool. Of course, when taking off and landing, the swimming pool would be covered by a glass plate. Otherwise, the plane would be flooded. In addition to the swimming pool, there were various fitness equipment, even yoga balls and indoor tennis. Almost everything that one could think of was available here. The entertainment room was similar to the hall, but it was smaller. It was suitable for people to play when there were fewer people. There was also a fixed wine cabinet. It seemed that Perwalton used to play with some beautiful girls and drink wine in the sky. This was really a holy place in high school. Hey, 2 ladies, do you mind watching some programs? After visiting various places, Perwalton took Zhonghai and the others to sit on the sofa. When the plane took off, Perwalton smiled and asked Azalina and Wallace Shelley. Although she was also very interested in these 2 girls, they were Zhonghai's people. She wouldn't take the initiative to take the initiative. Hearing her words, Azalina shrugged and said indifferently, "Whatever, this is your territory. Come on up, be more hospitable to our guests." Hearing Azalina's words, Perwalton also clapped his hands, and then 8 stewardesses came out from the cabin in the distance. Zhonghai also saw these stewardesses when he boarded the plane, but at that time, they were still dressed very well. Although they were wearing stewardess uniforms now, except for the hats on their heads, they were basically changed. Their upper body was changed to one that exposed their navel, and at the same time, The front was open to the V-neck, the bottom was changed to a small skirt, and the bottom was changed to a variety of silk stockings, white, black, transparent, and flesh-colored. After the 10 stewardesses came over, 8 of them stood in front of a steel pipe. With the sound of music, the 3D TV also began to play some stimulating music, and these stewardesses also danced to the music. There were 2 stewardesses, who were waitresses. One of them walked to Zhang Hai with a smile on her face. "Sir, what would you like to drink?" Looking at the stewardess in front of him, Zhang Hai thought for a moment and asked for beer. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the stewardess did not rush to leave, but said to Zhang Hai, "I suggest you try sake. It is also a specialty of our destination, Dongjing. It is indeed a pity if you don't try it." "I've drunk it, but I'm not used to the taste. I'll have beer." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the stewardess also smiled and went to the back. Not long after, she came back with a bottle of beer and took the initiative to open a bottle. Zhang Hai was just about to take it, but she suddenly sat in Zhang Hai's arms, and then took a sip in front of Zhang Hai, and then pouted at Zhang Hai. She wanted to give it to Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai smiled and did not care. He directly grabbed the beer bottle and took a sip. Seeing that Zhang Hai did not kiss her, the stewardess also smiled. After swallowing the beer, she still did not stand up and sat on Zhang Hai's lap. "I'm very curious. What is this gentleman's name?" "On this plane, to be exact, in this cabin there has never been a man." "Of course, the captain and co-captain are men, but they can't come in." Looking at Zhang Hai, the stewardess asked with a puzzled face. This is also one of the harem of Perwalton, but the restrictions are not as strict as in her home. She only asked that if the stewardess on the plane is not allowed to have a relationship with a man outside the contract period, or have a boyfriend. Of course, it does not mean that they will die of old age on the plane. If they have a boyfriend, they can apply. After receiving 1 year's salary, they can leave the flight team. Such a contract is very generous. "Oh, my surname is Jiang." Hearing that he may be the first male guest on this plane, Zhang Hai is also very happy. He chuckled and introduced himself. But just when he finished, the stewardess already knew who this man is. The legendary Zhang Hai of Winthrop. Perhaps for others, they have heard of Zhang Hai, but not Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai is not that important to them, but for this woman, she is very clear about Zhang Hai. Because she knows that Zhang Hai is the male host of this plane. Many people know that Zhang Hai domineeringly said that Perwalton is his woman at the Walton cocktail party. Although there is no title, people who follow Perwalton know that Zhang Hai is very important to her. "I didn't expect you to be Mr. Jiang." After knowing Zhang Hai's identity, the woman's body is closer to Zhang Hai, and her hands unconsciously increase the strength. Her pair of eyes looking at Zhang Hai are shining, and her well-developed breasts are directly pressed against Zhang Hai's chest. Feeling the elasticity, it should be real. "Hey girls, work harder. This is the only man I allow you to have sex with during work. If you really feel uncomfortable, go to him." At this time, Perwalton came over with 2 stewardesses who were dancing just now. Obviously, she has been enjoying this for a long time. At this time, one of her hands reached into the top of the stewardess on the left, and the other hand into the skirt of the stewardess on the right. Needless to say, she knows what she is doing. Seeing that the stewardess is trembling when she walked in front of Zhang Hai, kicked the stewardess on Zhang Hai's body with her high-heeled foot, and then said loudly. When they heard that Zhang Hai is the only man they can touch, the 10 stewardesses' eyes lit up almost at the same time. After all, they haven't tasted meat for a long time. Perwalton recruited stewardesses. Unlike her followers, the requirements are C. She recruited stewardesses who are beautiful, have a good figure, and are loyal to the contract. She didn't care if they had a boyfriend before. Therefore, whenever these girls heard the word man, they would go crazy. "Well, why are we still wasting time here?" Hearing Perwalton's words, the girl sitting in Zhang Hai's arms sat up straight, and then took off her coat. In an instant, 2 indescribable things jumped in front of Zhang Hai. At the same time, her 2 hands were constantly undoing Zhang Hai's pants. Maybe she felt that it was about time. The stewardess directly got on the horse, and the battle began. "Hey, aren't you going to play?" Looking at the fierce battle over there, Perwalton also sat next to Azalina, then opened her legs and sat down. Naturally, a stewardess came over to help her lick some indescribable places. "We have fun every day, so we don't care about this time." Hearing her words, Azalina chuckled. What she said was also true. Since the last layer of relationship with Zhang Hai was broken, Azalina and Zhang Hai really spent a lot of time together. In addition, she was originally an agent, so her needs in that area were not too strong, so it was okay. As for Wallace Shelley, she was now in a state of work. She had to look up information. As for Zhang Hai, it didn't matter. Zhang Hai's body was so good. They had plenty of opportunities. Then in the next few days after arriving in Dongjing, I won't be polite. Hearing the words of these two girls, Perwalton also said with a smile. At the same time, her eyes also looked at Zhang Hai, revealing a hint of excitement. Chapter 984. Get up and wash up, we're almost there. Leaning against the door of the room, Perwalton said to Zhang Hai with a smile. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai also raised his head from a pile of pink arms and legs, then fell heavily on the pillow. You really didn't treat your employees well, they are too crazy. Looking at the ceiling, although he just slept, Zhang Hai still felt a little tired. He came to help Perwalton to comfort her employees. I'm quite good to them, but some things can't be replaced, don't you think? Looking at Zhang Hai, Perwalton said with a chuckle, then walked out of the room. Zhang Hai also woke up the girls around him one by one, and then went into the bathroom to wash up. After 10 minutes, Zhang Hai came out very energized. Although he was still yawning, he had basically recovered. When he came out, the girls were gone. It seems that they have their own bathroom. Thinking of this, Zhang Hai stretched and walked out of the room. You're up. What do you want to eat? Walking into the hall, he saw that Perwalton, Azalina, and Wallace Shelley had been waiting here for a long time. Seeing Zhang Hai, Perwalton asked him, "Oh, anything is fine, a sandwich or noodles?" Hearing her words, Zhang Hai also nodded, then walked to the seat next to her and sat down. Perwalton had already clapped her hands and called a flight attendant who had just put on her clothes. Compared to their clothes just now, they have now changed back and became well-dressed. After all, they were about to land. Give him a bowl of ramen and a sandwich. Hearing Perwalton's order, the flight attendant also smiled and went to the back. Not long after, she came out with a plate with a large bowl of ramen and 4 cut sandwiches. Let me feed you. Putting the things in front of Zhang Hai, the flight attendant smiled and bent over, showing her surging upper body in front of Zhang Hai, and said softly. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai smiled awkwardly, then shook his head. Forget it, I'll eat this myself. Looking at Zhang Hai's embarrassed look, the flight attendant couldn't help but laugh. Will you take this flight when you go back? Looking at Zhang Hai eating noodles, the stewardess didn't care. She directly sat on the armrest of Zhang Hai's sofa. With a smile on her face, she looked at Zhang Hai who was wolfing down the noodles and asked, this. Hearing the flight attendant's words, it wasn't difficult for Zhang Hai, they didn't have enough time with him. He will also sit when he comes back. It's a benefit for you. But before Zhang Hai could speak, Perwalton over there agreed for him first. When she heard Perwalton's words, the flight attendant couldn't help but cheer in a low voice. What kind of clothes do you like, or fancy? You tell me, I'll go and study it with them. Looking at Zhang Hai, the flight attendant said with her eyes shining. Hearing what the flight attendant said, Zhang Hai was embarrassed. What is this? Fortunately, the plane didn't fly slowly, and finally let Zhang Hai get rid of the girl who wanted to communicate with Zhang Hai again. As the plane slowly landed, Zhang Hai and the others also arrived at Haneda International Airport in Tokyo. When the plane stabilized, the plane also connected to the covered bridge. Zhang Hai, Perwalton, Azalina, and Wallace Shelley also walked out of the special passage. But just out of the covered bridge, Zhang Hai saw more than a dozen bodyguards. There were black, white, and yellow people, wearing black suits and sunglasses, standing quietly on both sides of the passage. Needless to say, these people were here to protect Zhang Hai's safety. They should be Perwalton's people. Don't worry. I know there are a lot of people in Japan who want to cheat you. I have arranged everything. Looking at Zhang Hai, Perwalton said with a smile. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai was still very calm. Soon, when Zhang Hai and the others walked out of the airport, The people in charge of cargo had already taken out Zhang Hai's fish and the things brought by Walton this time. This time, the things they brought were not only Zhang Hai's fish. There was also Zhang Hai's lobsters. All of them were of the highest quality. The highest quality abalones, the highest quality lobsters, the highest quality tuna, the highest quality salmon, the highest quality sea cucumbers, and so on. The purpose of this was to open the Japanese market. Otherwise, it wouldn't be easy to open the door of a country for Walmart with just the bluefin golden gun. Hello, Miss Walton, I am Nakamura Masa, one of the people in charge of Walmart in Japan. Welcome for your guidance. While Zhang Hai and the others were waiting for the goods to be loaded, a middle-aged Japanese man ran over while gasping for breath. When he arrived in front of Zhang Hai and Walton, he did a 90-degree bow without saying a word. His hands were firmly attached to his trousers, and his feet were side by side. After he got up, he introduced himself. Hello, who is Nakamura Tetsuya to you? Hearing this man's words, Walton looked at him coldly and said. For Walton, except for Zhang Hai, she looked at all men coldly. Sometimes, it was easier for a woman to talk business with her than a man. She seemed to have a natural attitude of rejecting men. Hearing Walton's words, Nakamura Masa continued to bow and said humbly, It's my father. My father has already prepared a hotel and a banquet for you. Please come. Looking at his appearance, Zhang Hai couldn't help but whisper in his heart. He had to admit that at least on the surface, the Japanese people were flawless. It was said that it was difficult to slap a smiling face. When these guys saw others, they bowed 90 degrees and spoke very respectfully. Of course, no one knew what he was thinking in his heart. Maybe he was cursing Zhang Hai and the others in his heart. Sorry, I have to say no to his kindness. This is Mr. Zhang Hai, our company's most important partner. Because he has an unpleasant past with some Japanese families, it is difficult for us to trust a local hotel. I have already booked a hotel. If you don't mind, please invite your father to the hotel to discuss. Walton listened to Nakamura Masa in front of her and said very calmly. Then she took Zhang Hai's arm and got into a Rolls-Royce that had already driven over. Azalina and Wallace Shelley naturally followed. Azalina sat in the co-driver's seat, while Wallace Shelley sat beside Zhang Hai. Seeing Zhang Hai and the others leave, Nakamura Masa didn't have any objections. He just bowed all the way and respectfully sent off Zhang Hai and the others. After Zhang Hai and the others left, Nakamura Masa raised his head and muttered a few words. Then he took out his mobile phone and called his father. He didn't dare to discount Walton's words. At this time, Zhang Hai and the others were shuttling through the streets of Dongjing. Although Zhang Hai was very reluctant to admit it, Dongjing was indeed a very prosperous city. According to the world rankings, Dongjing could be ranked in the world's top 3 in terms of economy and population. After all, Japan was only made up of a few small islands. Whether it was resources or development space, it was very narrow. Therefore, their strategy was to gather the resources of the whole country to develop Dongjing. It turned out that they were right to do so. With the development of Dongjing, the other surrounding countries slowly followed. According to the words of a great man in China, this was called letting some people get rich first. Later, South Korea also adopted this method. South Korea was mainly their capital. The other places slowly developed after the rise of the capital. Zhang Hai had also been to the capital of South Korea, but to be honest, it did seem to be worse than Dongjing. From the airport to the city, the faster they walked, the more high-rise buildings Zhang Hai saw. Dongjing could be regarded as one of the fastest cities in the world. Basically, on the streets of Dongjing, almost everyone walked very fast. Almost everyone trotted across the street when the traffic light turned green. To be honest, Zhang Hai, who was used to the slow pace of life, was a little uncomfortable. Dongjing is like this. The pace of life here is faster than New York. Maybe it's because of the frequent earthquakes in Japan, so the safety of the people is not enough. They can only relieve their anxiety through work. You haven't been here at night. Later we can come out and have a look. It's very interesting and crazy. Looking at Zhang Hai's eyes, Walton also said with a smile. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai shrugged. He didn't have much love for Japan. Of course, in the past, his computer stored a lot of educational videos of teachers, which benefited him a lot. At least for many nights, He relied on these things to get through. The car was not driving fast on the streets of Dongjing. It could be said that it was very slow. Although it was not the morning rush hour or the evening rush hour, it was not the kind of traffic jam that was completely stagnant. The car was moving, but the speed was basically about 20 miles per hour. The fastest speed was about 40 miles per hour, which made Zhang Hai a little impatient. But no matter how impatient he was, he still had to sit. Finally, the car slowly arrived at the hotel Walton booked. After walking into the hotel, they did not go to the elevator. Instead, they went directly to the back of the hotel. Walton lived in a small independent Japanese-style courtyard. Chapter 985. The small courtyard didn't look big, but it wasn't small either. There was a circle of bodyguards in black standing around. These people were here to protect the safety of this small courtyard. Inside the small courtyard, the pond, the rooms, everything was similar to the Japanese courtyard in the anime. After Zhang Hai walked in, he saw that there were a total of 6 rooms, 3 of which had collapsed and 3 of which had beds. How do you want to live? Anyway, you are going to live with me. Looking at Zhang Hai, Walton said with a smile. Although she also satisfied her cravings on the plane, sometimes it was like this. The more she satisfied herself, the more she wanted it. If it weren't for the fact that she had just arrived, Walton didn't even want to pull Zhang Hai into the room now. Here. After choosing, Zhang Hai chose a large bedroom and pointed inside. Azalina and Wallace Shelley lived directly next to this room. They didn't want to live with Zhang Hai these days, so they let Zhang Hai and Walton live outside for a few days. Well, let's clean up. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Walton also laughed, and then motioned to the waiter who had been staying outside to come in and clean up. After all the cleaning was done, Zhang Hai and the others also moved in. Of course, before moving in, Azalina and Wallace Shelley had to check it again to make sure there was no problem before they were allowed to live. Where did you get these bodyguards? They are so powerful, beautiful, good in skills, good in figure, and rigorous in work. TSK, I am a little envious. After Azalina and Wallace Shelley finished checking and left, Walton took off her coat and lay on the bed, smiling at Zhang Hai. They're not ordinary people. They're special agents trained in Ulan. Azalina escaped. After I learned about the situation, I went to buy them. Hearing Walton's words, Zhang Hai briefly explained the origin of Azalina and the others. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Walton couldn't help but be stunned. You dare to use agents? Looking at Zhang Hai, Walton didn't go into too much detail. The strength of agents in this world was obvious to all. Everyone knew that they were very good, but those who dared to use them were basically desperados. The real rich people didn't dare to use agents, especially the retired agents. Rich people were different from drug dealers or those in the Grey Society. These people dared to use agents because they knew that agents were double-edged swords. If they didn't listen to them, they could just kill them directly. However, rich people couldn't kill people casually. The same was true for businessmen like Zhang Hai, and these agents were basically very knowledgeable people. If you bought them, these people might collude in private and kidnap you when you went out, or something like that. This was because special agents had no loyalty to speak of, especially those who had retired. Their organization was more like a mercenary group. They would listen to whoever paid them more. Because of this, special agents were quite unpopular in the bodyguard world. Walton didn't expect that Zhang Hai's people were all agents, and Zhang Hai trusted them so much. Don't doubt the people you use, and don't use the people you suspect. This has always been my policy. I believe in them. Hearing Walton's words, Zhang Hai also smiled, and then lay down beside her. Zhang Hai was telling the truth. He really thought so. Well, with this thing of yours, I'm not afraid that they won't give in. Hee. Do you want to warm up first? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Walton didn't want to destroy Zhang Hai's internal unity, so she changed the topic and said with a smile. Didn't you have enough on the plane? Looking at Walton who had climbed on top of him, Zhang Hai sighed. How can I have enough with you? Really, we only have a few days. We have to seize every minute and every second. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Walton patted Zhang Hai and said with a smile. Hearing what she said, Zhang Hai didn't talk nonsense. He turned over and pressed her under his body. The war began like this. More than 2 hours later, the clouds dispersed. Zhang Hai and Prawalton, who was obviously full, walked out of the room. Boss, just as you entered the room, an old man from Japan came to see Prawalton, but the people outside said that you had already rested. He should still be waiting outside now. Hearing the sound of Zhang Hai and Prawalton opening the door, Wallace Shelley and Azalina also walked out of the room and said to Zhang Hai, "It should be Nakamura Tetsuya. Let's go." Hearing Wallace Shelley's words, Prawalton also smiled, and then freely took Zhang Hai and walked outside. When they just came out, they saw an old man and a young man sitting by the pond in the distance drinking tea. Seeing Zhang Hai coming out, the two people immediately stood up. Zhang Hai had seen one of the two people before. It was Nakamura Masa, and the other old man seemed to be in his 60s. He looked 70% similar to Nakamura Masa. It seemed that this was his father, Nakamura Tetsuya, that Prawalton mentioned. "Miss Prawalton, welcome, welcome." Seeing Prawalton, the two people narrowed their eyes and smiled. Nakamura Masa still bowed 90 degrees, and Nakamura Tetsuya was unlikely to bow 90 degrees, but he also took the initiative to bow about 60 degrees. To be honest, although Zhang Hai didn't like Japanese people very much, maybe no one in the Northeast liked Japanese people. But when he saw an old man bowing to him, he also felt a little awkward, so he thought about it and wanted to return it. But Prawalton saw it first and straightened Zhang Hai's waist. "You're an existence of a higher level than them, so just nod your head." Leaning in Zhang Hai's ear, Prawalton said to Zhang Hai. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai also nodded. He really didn't understand these things. Sure enough, Zhang Hai just nodded. The two people didn't feel the slightest bit wrong. Before coming, they had already inquired about Zhang Hai's identity. The owner of the Soaring Dragon Manor, the current #1 beef supplier in the Western world, and also planned to seize the #1 seafood supplier in the Western world. His total assets were even tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, but because his assets were not listed, no one could know exactly how much money he had, but it was inevitable that he was more advanced than them. In their view, Zhang Hai should be regarded as the top existence at present, far from what they could compare with. It was already good that such a high-level figure could nod to them. In Japan and South Korea, age was indeed the key to measuring a person, but social status was also quite important. "I'm a little hungry, let's eat and talk." Seeing that Nakamura Masa and Nakamura Tetsuya were so polite, Prawalton's attitude towards them eased a little, and she was ready to give them a chance to have dinner with her. "I've already prepared, this way, please." Hearing Prawalton's words, Nakamura Tetsuya said with a smile, and then took the initiative to lead Zhang Hai and the others into the hotel. This Nakamura father and son were originally the managers of Shio department store. In 2002, Walmart bought 37% of the shares of Shio department store and became the largest shareholder. It entered the Japanese market, but later suffered losses for years and had to withdraw. But in 2007, my uncle was in power. He was a very extreme person, and he directly bought all the shares of Shio department store, and then increased the dumping. Now in Japan, although Walmart is not making money, at least it's not losing money, and it can be considered to have made a name for itself. My uncle is very decisive in this matter. Looking at the two people leading the way in front, Prawalton also introduced the two people's situation. At present, these two people were relatively trustworthy. After all their assets were in Walmart. If they annoyed Prawalton, who was the current manager of Sam's Club, they would be in big trouble. Zhang Hai also met Prawalton's family. To be honest, Prawalton's father gave people the appearance of a defender. Walmart would not make a big mistake in his hands, and it would only be stable. But Prawalton's uncle was a very aggressive pioneer. If Walmart did not make a lot of money in his hands, it would suffer a lot of losses. This was inevitable. It depends on the choice of Walmart's shareholders. At present, because of the relationship between Prawalton and Zhang Hai, Prawalton's father was slightly older, but who knows what will happen in the future. Following these two people, Zhang Hai walked quite fast. It didn't take long for them to come to a small Japanese restaurant, but at this time, there was only one table here. There were cups, bowls, seasonings, and chopsticks on the table, but there were no dishes. After everyone sat down, Nakamura Tetsuya clapped his hands, and then a group of people came in from outside. The leader was a young girl, wearing the kind of kimono often seen on TV. After walking in, she first knelt in front of Jiang Hai, then took the initiative to take off her clothes. What the hell is this? Looking at this girl, Jiang Hai was a little confused. He didn't quite understand what it meant, but Prawalton's eyes lit up. He patted Jiang Hai gently under the table. Just watch. This thing is called female body sheng. It is a very novel way to eat. Chapter 986. Female body sheng? Looking at the Prawalton, Jiang Hai had never eaten this thing before, but he had heard of it before. According to legend, this thing first appeared in Japan. When it first appeared, there was a group of wolves howling. But after so many years, everyone gradually forgot about it. This was the first time Jiang Hai had seen such a thing. Minasan, Wada Shiva, Yu, Dianei, Haji Mai, Dasa, Oily Pants Onagai, Muama Su. Just as Jiang Hai was looking at the girl here, the girl had already taken off her clothes. She knelt down and said to the people in front of her. At the same time, she was also showing her body. Jiang Hai's mind went through the girl's words. His Japanese was at half a level, and he mainly learned it from some teachers. This girl should be introducing herself. Jiang Hai usually read novels with a plot. He was a person who was more sentimental. This girl, in Jiang Hai's eyes, was about 14 or 15 years old. More or less. Anyway, Japanese girls were indeed quite petite. It was hard to tell how old they were. They weren't very pretty, but they had a small round face and a slightly sharp chin. To be honest, they were very cute. When people looked at them, they would have the urge to protect them. Ravage her? Well, actually it was about the same meaning. This girl looked very much like a teacher named Sakaguchi Mie. Jiang Hai had once read her works, but this girl was whiter than the teacher. Her eyes were also more watery. Her figure was very slender, not fat, not thin. He couldn't see her bones at all. She didn't have a single hair on her body. What surprised Jiang Hai the most was that this girl's upper body and lower body were pink and white. Of course, there was no hair on her body. This is the vessel this time. Her name is Yu Chan and she is 15 years old this year. She is specially trained to become a female. She needs to start training before her menarche at the age of 12. She is not allowed to have any hair on her body. She also needs to be soaked in fresh milk for 2 hours a day. There are strict requirements for her food and accommodation. At the same time, she has to have type A blood. Most importantly, she has to be of type C. Ladies and gentlemen, please. Please come in, Nakamura said softly when he saw Jiang Hai looking at this girl. Hearing Nakamura's words, the girl lay down on the table in front of her. Then, a few middle-aged women came in. After carefully bowing, they knelt in front of the girl and placed things on the girl's body. Looking at this girl in front of him, Jiang Hai more or less felt that she was a bit perverted. This is not good. It's too insulting. Pulling Prawalton's clothes, Jiang Hai looked at her and whispered. To be honest, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. But Jiang Hai still had a bottom line. Mr. Jiang, you're wrong. This is also a job, and they are willing to do it. The female body is also divided into different levels, but even the lowest level, the income is higher than the average manager. For example, Yo in front of us, the cost of each appearance is 17 million yen, equivalent to about 1 million yuan. This is already a high income in Tokyo. Although Jiang Hai's voice was not loud, the room was still too small, so it was easy for the two people in front of him to hear. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Nakamura also spoke to Jiang Hai in his half-baked Chinese. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai didn't know what to say, because the word willing blocked his words. In Huaxia, Jiang Hai had been taught that pornography, gambling, drugs, and so on were all evil. There was no such thing as voluntary. For example, in all the Huaxia movies and TV series, all the people in the brothel were forced to do so. They were sold and then forced to work as women in certain special jobs. So Jiang Hai was instilled with this idea since he was a child. But since he came to the United States, he found that things were not like this. In this industry, there were quite a few people who treated this as a career. They didn't think that there was anything shameful about doing such a thing. Instead, they liked it very much. They could make money and feel comfortable. There was nothing wrong with it, so Zhang Hai's worldview was quite subverted abroad. At this time, he really didn't know what to say. This was because he didn't know if this girl was really willing or not. If he were to make a move and she didn't want him, then Zhang Hai would be in an awkward position. Besides, he had only heard of it before. This was the first time he tried it so close. He felt a little lost if he didn't eat it. Soon, when Zhang Hai was in a dilemma, the middle-aged women over there had finished setting up. Then, they bowed to Zhang Hai and walked out. After closing the door, Nakamura Masa and Nakamura Tetsuya were still sitting far away, motioning to Zhang Hai to eat. Aren't they eating? Seeing that the two people didn't move, Zhang Hai looked at Prawalton with some doubts. Them? Don't worry about them. They won't eat with us. Let's add some seasoning. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Prawalton shrugged and said, the Americans were the least particular about the concept of hierarchy, but the Japanese were the most particular. No matter what they said, they wouldn't eat with the Walton family. Of course, banquets were an exception. They didn't have the status to sit at the table at such a private banquet. Prawalton was also used to this. After all, they treated everyone the same. Since Prawalton said so, Zhang Hai didn't hold back. He made mustard and soy sauce, and some vinegar and poured it into his small plate. Although it wasn't as delicious as Chi Ya's, it wasn't very bad. After everything was done, Zhang Hai glanced at the girl in front of him. At this time, the girl's body was full of ingredients, mainly sashimi, all kinds of fish, lobster, sea urchin yellow, sea cucumber slices, prawns, and so on. There were also some shelled crab legs and so on. In addition, there was sushi. Zhang Hai didn't eat sashimi, because before he got the Dragon Ball, his stomach wasn't very good. After he got the Dragon Ball, he was naturally cured of all diseases. However, he still wasn't used to eating sashimi, so he didn't eat sashimi. Fortunately, the other party understood, so he cooked the prawns and other things, except that the shell was removed. Thinking of this, Zhang Hai picked up a prawn with his chopsticks and put it on his plate to take a bite. I don't feel anything different. You have to eat this thing with sauce. Looking at Zhang Hai's expression that didn't have any special taste, Prawalton smiled and said to Zhang Hai, but hearing her words, Zhang Hai pointed to the plate in his hand. Isn't this sauce? I mean, you have to eat it with sauce. Just like this. Prawalton met Zhang Hai's gaze and chuckled, then used the silver chopsticks in her hand to pinch a protruding part of the girl's upper body that can't be described. Well, it tastes great. Don't you want to try it? Prawalton said happily after putting it into her mouth and chewing twice. Hey! Why are you so disgusting? I don't eat that thing. Needless to say, Zhang Hai also knows what that thing is and immediately shook his head. Although he likes beautiful women, he is not a pervert. He doesn't have this kind of hobby. I don't believe that you haven't eaten it. You have eaten it with me. Those in your house, which one haven't you tasted? Prawalton said contemptuously to Zhang Hai as she rolled her eyes at him. Obviously, she thinks that Zhang Hai is pretending to be serious. That's different. Waving his hand, even if Zhang Hai talks about this topic, he still can't let it go. What's the difference? It's nothing more than her eating yours, and you eating hers. How much is this girl's first time? Prawalton rolled her eyes at Zhang Hai and said to the Nakamura father and son. Leave it all to us, you don't have to worry about it. It's her honor. When they heard Prawalton's words, Nakamura Masa and Nakamura Tetsuya bowed down in surprise. For them, if this small amount of money can make Prawalton and Zhang Hai happy, it is naturally the best, but Zhang Hai waved his hand. I said stop here, I'm not here to do this. Looking at Prawalton, Zhang Hai said seriously. He is indeed not a picky person, but he can't be so desperate, right? After all, as the old saying goes, you are like a demon before you fuck, but you are like a Buddha after you fuck. Although he didn't fuck just now after all, he talked with Prawalton for 2 hours, and now he is not short of women. Well, it's up to you. Seeing Zhang Hai's serious face, Prawalton smiled. She likes to see Zhang Hai like this. Whether it is outside or on some battlefield, she can't resist Zhang Hai's orders. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai glanced at her, then picked up another shrimp and ate it. The girl, who had been lying on the table without moving, turned her head at this time and looked at Zhang Hai with a trace of gratitude in her eyes. Although in their line of work, Sooner or later they would lose their first time, but if they could delay it by a day, it would be best to delay it by a day. She was really grateful to Zhang Hai. Chapter 987. President, the latest news, Zhang Hai has come to Tokyo. Just as Zhang Hai was enjoying the special Japanese dishes in the hotel, in a huge house somewhere in Tokyo, a man in a suit knelt in front of an old man in Japanese clothes and said with a serious face. After hearing his words, the old man just nodded slightly, then took the tea handed over by a girl beside him and took a sip gently. This Zhang Hai is really courageous. He even dares to come to Tokyo. Doesn't he know that he has offended us? Putting down the tea, the old man said indifferently. Hearing his words, the man in front of him lowered his head even more. He came with Miss Walton of the Walton family. The security measures are quite tight. Only the father and son of the Nakamura family can see them. Looking at the old man in front of him, the man said with a serious face, "Nakamura, tell the people below that I want to see them." Hearing his words, the old man gently took a sip of tea, then chuckled and said very indifferently. He still had some confidence in the Nakamura clan, which was a fence-sitter. At this time, Zhang Hai didn't know that someone was targeting him. In fact, even if he knew, he wouldn't care. When he came, he was already prepared to be targeted. He was not afraid of being targeted because his strength and level now can be ignored. You know, Zhang Hai has never been in existence that can be easily bullied. After dinner, Walton specially brought Zhang Hai and the Nakamura father and son to discuss how to use these 2 days to promote. The time of this fish is limited, so promotion is naturally very important. According to Tetsuya Nakamura, the best way is to transport the fish to their store in Tsukiji Market and auction it directly there. That is to promote their store and sell it at a good price there. Of course, this has to be discussed by Zhang Hai. After all, there will be fewer customers. For example, some people who don't get along with Walton will not come, but the general big customers will not be a problem. Zhang Hai was also very calm about this. He actually doesn't care much about this. He doesn't care whether Walton uses his fish to advertise, because this fish is more of a test. The specific plan will be decided by Walton, as long as he pays for it. Since Zhang Hai is easy to talk to, other things are naturally easy to handle. Soon, the 3 people here had already discussed how to promote. Zhang Hai doesn't know much about these things, so he just sat there and rested. About an hour later, the 3 people also finished studying, and the Nakamura father and son left respectfully. "Let's go out and play." Watching the 2 people leave, Walton smiled and said to Zhang Hai, "Go out and play? Are you sure?" Hearing Walton's words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but look at her with some doubts. Zhang Hai himself knows that he is very unpopular in Japan. Now he wants to go out and play. Is he looking for death? Don't worry. There will be no problem. My security is top-notch. Seeing Zhang Hai's surprised look, Walton also said with a smile. Hearing that she said there is no problem, Zhang Hai has nothing to say. Follow her. He went back and called Azalina and Wallace Shelley. Of course, the security guards were also there, but they were in the dark. If Zhang Hai didn't look carefully, he wouldn't be able to see them. On the surface there were only the 4 of them. When they came to the hall, Jiao Sun had already prepared the car. "Where are we going?" Getting in the car, Zhang Hai asked Walton. He is really not familiar with this place. Although many otakus have the idea of going to Japan, Zhang Hai didn't have a chance to come here before. Now he disdains to come here, so he doesn't know much about Japan. On the contrary, Walton has been here several times. The night view here in Yoto is still very good. We have 3 choices. If you want to buy things and enjoy the night here, then go to Ginza. If you want to get some delicious food, go to Shibuya. If you want to go to Izakaya, then go to Shinjuku. After getting in the car, Walton said to Zhang Hai with a smile, "Where do you want to go?" Hearing Walton's words, Zhang Hai asked Azalina and others behind him. "It's up to you, but you'd better not go to places with too many people. It will be dangerous." When Azalina heard Zhang Hai's words, she shrugged, indicating that she didn't care, and Wallace Shelley naturally smiled and didn't say anything. "Then let's go to Shibuya first, and then to Shinjuku. Perwalton raised his eyebrows at Zhanghai and said with a smile. Shibuya is a place name in Kyoto. It was first established because of the Dongheng department store. In terms of commercial value, this place may be far less than Ginza, but young people prefer to be here. Shibuya is very noisy at night. There are many snacks here, and many young people will play here. After Zhanghai's car arrived here, the four of them got out of the car and came to Shibuya Central Street. As soon as they got out of the car, Zhanghai had to sigh. The girls of this island country were really cold. In Japan, no matter the season, they had to wear skirts to school. At this time, it was almost the same on this street. There were all kinds of girls. They were wearing thick jackets, coats and so on. After all, it was just the beginning of spring. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was winter, but they were basically wearing skirts below. Obviously, the sales of pants in Japan were not very ideal, especially for women's pants. During the day, Zhanghai saw that the city was busy everywhere. At night, it was not much better. Even if they were young people, carrying the things they bought or touring around, their footsteps were quite fast. They had no intention of strolling after dinner, so Zhanghai took a look and retracted his gaze. He began to pay attention to the snacks in Shibuya. As for the beauties of Japan, have you heard of the 4 major sorcery of East Asia? Thailand's sex change, South Korea's plastic surgery, China's Photoshop, and Japan's makeup. God knows what these girls look like after removing their makeup. In any case, Zhanghai didn't want to see it. Moreover, he was still in the state of a semi-sage. It didn't matter if he didn't see it. It was better to pay more attention to the snacks. To be honest, the snacks in Japan were quite rich. Of course, there was no way to compare with China, but there were many snack bars on the street, just like the night market in China. Zhanghai originally didn't have much demand for women. It was mainly because of the effect of the Dragon Balls, but his pursuit of delicious food had always been there. Looking at these snacks, Zhanghai's fingers were also moved. He couldn't help but walk over and take a look. When it comes to Japanese snacks, everyone basically has some understanding. After all, cartoons and such are often shown in them. There are also many such snack stalls in China. For example, Tongluo Yaki, which is honey mixed with bean paste filling in the middle. This thing is also a lot in China. In cartoons, it is Doraemon's favorite. There is also Wagyu fruit, which is a cold cake in China. There is nothing to introduce. Sushi rolls were a type of sushi, and there were many of them on the streets of Tokyo. Rice balls were actually similar to sushi rolls, but there was more rice in them, and they were much cheaper. They were considered a relatively cheap snack. Taiyaki is similar to Tongluo Yaki, but the dough is made into a fish shape and the inside is also filled with bean paste. Octopus balls. This is Zhanghai's favorite snack. He often eats them in China. Naturally, he wants to try the authentic one here. Tempura is fried prawns. Of course, prawns are the best. In addition to prawns, there are also vegetables and fish. In addition, there is also oden and fried chicken. Zhanghai is not a fan of fried chicken. There are a lot of fried chicken in the United States, but he is still very interested in oden. Along the way, Perwalton is looking at the girls and clothes. Azalina and Wallace Shelley are looking at the surroundings. Of course, they will occasionally look at the clothes and such. As for Zhanghai, he is simply looking at the food. First, he bought 2 boxes of octopus balls. Then, he bought 10 skewers of oden. Then, he bought a box of tempura. Finally, he bought a few teriyaki. To be honest, Zhanghai didn't eat enough because he doesn't eat raw fish. On the other hand, the girl's body was basically full of raw fish. There was very little sushi and the like. It was impossible to put freshly fried fish on the girl's body. This was very inhumane. Therefore, Zhanghai almost didn't eat anything. Now he was making up for it. They eat along the way. When they are almost done shopping in Shibuya, Zhanghai is almost done eating. Then let's go to the izakaya in Shinjuku. Seeing that Zhanghai is almost done eating, Perwalton also said with a smile, "Oh, let's go." After stuffing the last fried prawn into his mouth, Zhanghai also nodded. Then the 4 people returned to their car and drove directly to Kyoto's famous red light district. But when they approached here, their car was stopped by the police. Looking at the police who stopped the car, Zhang Hai and Prawalton couldn't help but frown. The police here knocked on the window and motioned Prawalton to lower the window. In other people's territory, Prawalton can't go against them. So he lowered the window and looked at the police standing beside him with some doubts to see what they are going to do. Chapter 988. Miss, hello, to enter the Shinjuku district, please accept the inspection. The window was pressed down, and the police outside were not as bad as imagined. Instead, one of them was full of smiles and politely said to Prawalton, "Go and talk to my people." Hearing his words, Prawalton didn't care and pressed the window again. At this time, a man in a black suit came over first. After negotiating with the police, he let Zhang Hai and the others enter. The man also walked to Prawalton's car and explained very politely. Recently, tourists often complain that the security in Shinjuku is not very good. In addition, the recent political situation is more sensitive, so the police will also set up a checkpoint here to check all the vehicles that want to enter this area to ensure the safety of the area. Looking at Zhang Hai and the others, the man said very indifferently. Then Prawalton nodded and went to the back car. Then Zhang Hai and the others drove directly into this area, but no one dared to check them. After Zhang Hai and the others drove in, they saw a lot of izakaya. Izakaya was not a brothel. If one were to describe it, it was somewhat similar to the food stalls in China. It cooked delicious food and let the men and women who had worked for a day boast here. In fact, it was not very messy inside. Everyone had their own compartment, so there were few people who made trouble. Basically, they were open all night. Of course, if they drank too much, it was not necessarily so. But Zhang Hai and the others said that they came to the izakaya, but not here. Their goal was actually Kabuki-cho. There was a special Kabuki-cho location in Shinjuku. It was a street called Kabuki-cho Street. Zhang Hai's car was parked here, but before going in, Prawalton deliberately waited for her bodyguards to arrive. Then she walked in with Zhang Hai. The flashing red lights in every country were the same. A bit messy. Walking into Kabuki-cho Street, Zhang Hai found that this place was really bold. As soon as he walked in, he saw a lot of advertisements that made people's hormones burst out. For example, 40 minutes, 8,000 pills and so on, and 24 hours. But at this time, the man who helped Zhang Hai and the others to avoid the police inspection came over. "Let me be your guide for the rest of the road." This person was a white man who looked to be about 30 years old. He looked at Prawalton and Zhang Hai and said with a serious face. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai glanced at Prawalton. When he saw Prawalton nod, Zhang Hai also nodded. It seemed that this person should be a local tyrant here. First, don't look at these first things first. To be honest, these are all fake. They are all little girls who accompany you to chat. The Love Plus over there should be the most that kind of shop, that is, a little girl will come over and give you a bath. It's the kind of shop that is only responsible for taking off and not landing. If you want to land, you have to talk to them in private. The price is not something that ordinary people can compare to. Seeing that Zhang Hai agreed, this person also began to introduce the nearby situation. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai was a little confused. There was such a thing? It seems that the Japanese are really treacherous. If ordinary tourists want to find the kind of people and shops that do that kind of thing, they have to look for the shop in front of us, which means that it's free. They are the head of the chicken here, but of course, they don't want to be completely free, because it's very likely that they will find some antis for those tourists. If you want to play here, you have to find those very simple shops that have nothing to do with that kind of thing, such as a strawberry jam shop, a Shinjuku ice cream shop, and so on. At the same time, you also have to look at what they write outside. If it's pure Japanese, then it's not for foreigners, only for Japanese and English. Seeing that Zhang Hai understood, everyone continued to talk as they walked. At the same time, Prawalton's bodyguards also blocked the guys who wanted to come over to solicit customers. "You are very familiar with this place." Hearing his words, Zhang Hai looked at him meaningfully. "I'm a staff member of Walmart in Japan, so I've been here a few times with clients." "Alright, let's not go any further. If we go any further, we will enter the territory of the male prostitutes." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the man here smiled a little awkwardly. Then, when he saw a movie theater behind a dinosaur in the distance, He immediately changed the topic. Hearing his words, Prawalton and Jiang Hai also looked there. The two of them were not interested in men, so naturally, they would not go there. But Jiang Hai also took a look from afar. Basically, the signs there were some non-mainstream, punk, and so on. Their hair was more colorful than the other. There was no other way this was popular in Japan and South Korea. It was really hard to imagine that some little girls in China liked this kind of thing. Anyway, in Jiang Hai's eyes, it was quite disgusting. Mr. Jiang, do you want to look for service here? After looking around briefly, the man here asked Jiang Hai and Prawalton. He also heard some of Miss Prawalton's hobbies, but usually, Prawalton was very reliable. She would not show her hobbies in front of her subordinates. It was precisely because of Jiang Hai that she found a sly guy to accompany Jiang Hai. But accompanying her man to such a place was really exciting. Looking at the man, although Jiang Hai was not very interested in these kinds of services, he still asked, "Do you have any idea?" Here there are cheap and expensive services. For example, half a set of services is basically done by hand, and you can't do that. The pink salon over there is the cheapest, and the time is the shortest, about 6,000 yen. The Vision Club over there is also half a set of services, but it can be combined with the temptation of uniforms, and the price is between 10,000 to 12,000 yen. The Vision Club over there is about the same level, but it's slightly more expensive, 15,000 to 20,000 yen. The hotel pays for the cost of a night's stay, which is between 20,000 and 40,000 yen. The quality of the girls in the bubble bath is pretty good, but it's divided into high, and low grades, and the price ranges from 30,000 to 100,000 yen. The quality of the girls in the bubble bath is very high, but it's only half a set, and the price is between 40,000 and 70,000 yen. The girls in the high-end date are basically models and university students, and the price is between 80,000 and 150,000 yen. The highest grade is the hot spring date, where they will send you to a nearby hot spring for a day, and the price is basically about 400,000 yen. There are also some agencies here that specialize in booking AWA actresses and some female celebrities, and the price is between 300,000 and 800,000 yen. If Mr. Jiang needs it, I can contact them at any time. Oh right, everything in the shop is not allowed, as it's illegal. In Japan, there are clear rules that forbid it, so if you want to do it, you can only go to a hotel. Also, at this time, the Kabuki-cho basically only executes the customers recommended by regular customers and regular customers. Ordinary strangers will also be rejected. Looking at Jiang Hai, this person started to talk non-stop. It seems like he really wasn't an ordinary old driver. You can't do that. It's so boring. Let's go back. Since we can make an appointment, it's the same if we go back. Hearing this person's introduction, Jiang Hai didn't speak, but Prawalton on the other side spoke up. She saw very clearly that even men couldn't do that, let alone women, so it was better to go back and play than to do that. Well, okay, let's go back. Hearing Prawalton's words, Jiang Hai didn't say much, although he still wanted to see more here. He didn't come here for that, so he walked out first. Hey, didn't you just say that we can make an appointment with AWA actresses and female stars? Do you have any photos or something to show me? But Jiang Hai left, but Prawalton pulled the man and said with interest. Hearing Prawalton's words, the man was a little confused, because he didn't know what was wrong with Prawalton. He thought that he flattered her too much. He was a little embarrassed for a while. It was all his fault. How could he say those words so easily? Don't talk nonsense, show me. Seeing that the man's face was not right, Prawalton didn't care. Sometimes it was interesting to scare these men, not to mention that she was now very interested in these AWA actresses. Well, okay, I'm only familiar with this Idea Pocket Company. Hearing Prawalton's urging, the man had no other choice but to bow, then took out his mobile phone, and quickly entered a website. Some girls' photos appeared on the mobile phone. Is it okay? Are the photos reliable? Looking at the mobile phone in her hand, even Prawalton knew that the makeup skills of Japanese girls were very magical, so Prawalton was a little uncertain. These are all quite reliable. After thinking about it, the man whispered. Then this one, called Yuki Tina, this one called Amami Hai, this one called Ai Haneda, is this Nishiki Jessica a mixed blood? Including her, and this Hime Mizuko, let's start with these 5 people. Tell them to wait for us in the room. Hearing the words of the man, Prowalton casually nodded and found a few pleasing to the eye. Chapter 989. When Jiang Hai and Prowalton returned to the hotel, the people there had already called the company. 4 people who could please the Walmart group, the company spared no effort, not to mention the people from the head office. So in less than half an hour, the 5 girls selected by Prowalton had already arrived from various places. They took a shower, put on makeup, changed their clothes, and came to Prowalton's room. At this time, Jiang Hai and the others were still on the road. It was not that Prowalton did not want to drive fast, but it was because he could not drive fast. He had to admit that the traffic in Dongjing was more congested than in the capital. Although it was already midnight, the cars on the road were still very slow, stopping from time to time. At about 10:30 in the evening, Jiang Hai and the others returned home. But as soon as they entered the house, Azalina and Wallace Shelley looked at each other, then asked Jiang Hai and Prowalton to wait for a while. Then they walked in and opened the door of Prowalton's room while holding a gun in one hand. As soon as the door opened, they saw 5 girls in bathrobes chatting. When they saw the door suddenly open, the 5 girls immediately knelt down and greeted the people outside. "Well, don't scare them. I asked them to come over. Let's learn together." Looking at the 5 teachers here, Prowalton, who was a little nervous at first, laughed and then said to Azalina and the others, "There are outsiders. We will sleep here." If it was just Jiang Hai and Prowalton, or even Prowalton's girls, Azalina and the others would not care, but now that there were outsiders, they had to care. Seeing that Azalina and Wallace Shelley were ready to stay, Prowalton also smiled and then pushed Jiang Hai in. "Your mission today is to serve this person well. Of course, you'll have to teach us your unique skills." Prowalton looked at the 5 teachers in front of him and said with a smile. After hearing Prowalton's words, the 5 teachers nodded shyly and took the initiative to stand up and walk to Jiang Hai. Meanwhile, Jiang Hai was already in a daze. Among the teachers in front of him, 3 of them were very familiar to him, and 2 of them looked familiar. Tina Yumiju, whose stage name was Rio. Jiang Hai knew a lot of her educational videos, such as the Newlyweds, campus beauty pageants, and so on. Although the license plate number couldn't be announced here, he knew a lot of her educational videos. As for that Tian Hai, some people said that her cough, the parts that shouldn't be described were fake, and that her acting was a bit exaggerated, but wasn't she beautiful? Jiang Hai's computer still had the video she made in school. That Xueqi Jessica, Jiang Hai knew that she had a lot of videos, such as Racing Queen, Newcomer Beauty, and so on. Of course, Jiang Hai himself had never seen it. No matter if others believed it or not, he believed it anyway. As for the other 2 teachers, although Jiang Hai didn't know their names, he was familiar with them. Now that he saw them in person, although Jiang Hai just said that he wasn't interested in them, the Dragon Balls in his body were ready to move at this time. "We will teach you some skills in this regard and the reaction of a man, so that you can be more comfortable and harmonious in your future life." The 5 teachers came in front of Jiang Hai and helped Jiang Hai take off his clothes. Xueqi Jessica, who was a quarter Italian, also modestly said to the 3 women beside her. Hearing her words, Azalina was a little embarrassed, Wallace Shelley was ready to take note, and Prowalton was watching the situation here without blinking. Soon, they took off Jiang Hai's clothes, and they also took off their bathrobes. At this time, they were also wearing some more sexy clothes inside. Of course, they didn't cover the places that should be covered. Then the teachers knelt in front of Jiang Hai and began the pre-battle preparations that shouldn't be described. The indescribable swallowing and spitting is also a skill. The most indescribable point is where he can't be described, and when he's teasing, he can't keep attacking there. Looking at Prowalton, Azalina, and Wallace Shelley in front of her, Xueqi Jessica, who was the best at English, let the others demonstrate. She also took over from time to time and explained to them at the same time. Originally, Jiang Hai had always been very strong in this regard. After all, his physical fitness was there, but this time, he couldn't hold on for 15 minutes. After a while, when the battle started, how to use his waist and legs. Not only could his legs clamp Jiang Hai's waist, but he could also put them on his shoulders. He could also use his toes to brush his hair. There was also the coordination of other support personnel. How to attack, how to maximize the battle, which angle was the most comfortable, which angle was the best, which angle was the wrong one. Looking at the 5 teachers in front of her teaching one by one, Azalina was a little embarrassed at first, but later she also watched. As for Pro Walton, he had already taken off his clothes and was touching himself while watching the battle in front of him. Usually, when Zhang Hai fought against 5 people, he could still fight fiercely. But in front of these professional teachers, Zhang Hai was a little embarrassed. In the past, the time was shortened quickly, and he couldn't hold on for more than 20 minutes. But in the eyes of these teachers, it was already amazing. One must know that ordinary people might not even be able to hold on for more than 10 minutes, and all the actors had to take drugs. But they were still straight, which was convenient for filming. And most importantly, the person had to be replaced. Unlike Zhang Hai, there was no problem at all in this scene. Tawana even smiled and asked Zhang Hai if he wanted to be a male actor. It must be a very powerful existence. While Zhang Hai and his women were studying here, on the other side of the Akita mansion, Nakamura, who Zhang Hai met today, was led into the mansion by someone. When he came to the main house, he saw an old man sitting at the head of the table. Nakamura Masa greets President Akita. Seeing the old man, Nakamura Masa took a few steps forward and bowed. Then he just stood there and looked at the old man who was drinking tea in front of him. He didn't intend to sit down and talk about the old days. Masa, you don't have to be so polite. We are old acquaintances. How is your father? Looking at Nakamura Masa in front of him, the old man surnamed Akita put down the tea in his hand and said to Nakamura Masa with a smile. Thanks to you he's fine, but it's already very late today, so my father went back to rest. If there's anything, you can tell me. Looking at President Akita, Nakamura Masa just smiled, then said seriously. Good. You really have the shadow of your father. What I want to tell you, you should know, right? How about it? Are you ready to help me? Looking at Nakamura Masa, President Akita smiled, then said with a golden light in his eyes. Sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. But unfortunately, Nakamura Masa ignored him. You don't understand? All right, I'll be frank. I want you to help me deal with Zhang Hai. Seeing that Nakamura Masa didn't agree, President Akita frowned, then said seriously. But hearing his words, Nakamura Masa turned around and was about to leave. What? We haven't talked about the conditions yet? You rejected it? Are you and your father so willing to be the dogs of the Americans? Looking at Nakamura Masa's uncooperative look, President Akita's eyes narrowed, and killing intent surged. We are businessmen. We won't do things that don't benefit us. Moreover, even if my father and I are dogs, we will choose a good master. Compared to you, to be honest, whether it's strength, magnanimity or power, you are far inferior. Hearing President Akita's words, Nakamura Masa said with disdain. The Japanese are like this, when you're not as strong as them, you can reason with them, but they won't reason with you. They will tell you that the fist is the reason, but when your fist is bigger than them, and after beating them, they won't talk about the law with you. They still think that the fist is the reason. Comparing the Akita family and the Walton family is like the difference between an ant and an elephant. Nakamura Masa was ambitious, but he wasn't stupid. If he really followed them to deal with Zhang Hai, it's not a big deal whether they can deal with him or not, but after that, the Walton family's revenge will destroy his family. Under the premise that it has nothing to do with politics, he naturally made a choice. If Zhang Hai is fine, then they will still be the representatives of the Walton family. If something happens to Zhang Hai, they will be dead. What should he choose? Is there a need to say it? So the moment President Akita opened his mouth, he had already made his decision. These bastards without national integrity. Idiots, shit. Looking at Nakamura Masa walking out, President Akita didn't dare to kill him at this time, so he had no other choice but to curse. But he was not willing to let Zhang Hai go just like that. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.